The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we're coming to you live this morning with Dr. Doreen. For a moment there, I was like, what happened? I'm normally on the other side. And then it just flipped. But we're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh for our favorite segment of the week, Ask Dr. Doreen. She's going to be answering your questions in just a couple of seconds, but I'm so happy to be here with her. In fact, I'm in a ridiculously unexplainable good mood, but we're taking it. Because there's a lot to be not happy about. And I'm happy to be here. And I'm happy to be here with you, Dr. Granpeesheh. I want to say briefly that Dr. Granpeesheh is the true expert, I think, in the field right now that can give us the best answers because she's been working in this field for over 30 years. In fact, I think it's much closer to the other decade, but I hate to tell on you because there's nothing about your skin that would tell anybody that. So I hate to give you away. But she's been working with individuals on the spectrum from very early ages up through senior citizens. And she also has an eye to helping the entire family to look at these individuals and see what they need to grow and reach their highest potential. So I adore her. She has been instrumental in our family's life and in my son's life. And I'm going to, brag on him and her later on in the show. But welcome, Dr. Granpeesheh. We're so glad you're here.
Good morning, Shannon. It's always a pleasure to be here. And thank you so much. All your kind words.
Well, it's such a delight.
It's a new year. We're going to keep on doing. Yeah.
It is. And our topic this week, we always have a topic every week. And our topic this week is restart, renew, this reset the button. And I have decided, because you know what Abraham Lincoln said, that most people are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. And so I decided somewhere in the last, week that I was going to pretend that this is a spa vacation.
Oh, nice.
In which I'm working from time to time. I'm like, well, if I just look at it that way, it's a spa vacation. If somebody had said, would you like to take a year off? And during that year, you don't have to focus on grocery shopping. You'll do everything online and just take a year off and take care of yourself. I would be like, yippee. Yeah. So I'm pretending that it's a spa vacation and I'm thrilled with my spa vacation. So there we are. Now, but we know that many of you are not on a spa vacation, mentally or otherwise, and that you've got a lot of issues that you're dealing with. That's why Dr. Granpeesheh is here to help you to get to the good stuff. Believe me, been there, done. I was where you are, a lot of you, not entirely, but on my own journey with my family and my son. And we want to help you to get to the good stuff. So this show is meant to be interactive. We are live right now. This is Wednesday, the 13th of January. If you've been watching things on television, take a respite from them. Come and be here with us. And so you can be writing in your questions. Right now, we're live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Periscope. Just write your question in on those platforms. We're saying good morning to and Amanda. So glad that you are here. And if you want to shout out, please write in on whatever platform that you're watching right now. And if you want to watch us later on, because some of you are working or doing whatever, we're available on podcast on all major podcasting sites as a free download. That's iTunes, Apple Music, Google Music, Deezer. We're on iHeartRadio. like Spotify, wherever it is, you'll find us there. And if you don't find us somewhere that you like to watch that where you get free podcasts, please let us know, because Traven is he's like this amazing sleuth where he finds all the places to be. We're on Ghana, you guys. So find us in those places and tune in and listen to the show in podcasts. You can still ask questions. In fact, if you have a question when we're not live, go to autism-live.com, click the chat button. A lot of the times our starter questions are taken directly from there. And Dr. Gramsci, I'm gonna jump right in here with one of our starter questions, if that's okay with you.
Of course. Please go right ahead.
I would love to know how to handle a child who gets into a meltdown because we refuse to give him chips or anything that is not good for him. We are tired of giving in to him just to keep the peace. He is verbal and turning 25 soon.
Oh, that's so difficult. I wish he was turning 5, because it's, of course, a lot harder when our children get older and these habits have become ingrained, and now they're also much bigger and can object. But what I always like to go back to is just trying to give a very brief explanation, and I hope it'll help other parents as well. Brief explanation of what happens when a child has a tantrum, or actually what happens whenever we give in, right? Whether it's a tantrum or yelling or hitting or any kind of challenging behavior and we give in. For a moment, if you can just think of things from the child's perspective. I scream, I tantrum, I hit, I yell, and I get what I want. Anything, any behavior that is followed by a reward will increase. Any behavior that is followed by a reward will increase. That is the first basic premise of operant conditioning. If you want something to increase, reward it. And that is essentially what has been happening. So every time he has tantrumed, you've given in. By giving in, you are rewarding him, right? You're saying the tantrum works. You tantrum, I give you what you want. And so you need to stop doing that, and as soon as you possibly can. And honestly, I know it's a very scary thing when your child is 25, so you should probably have support and help before you do this, because I don't know how severe these tantrums are. The parents noted that this is a high-functioning individual, so possibly not extremely severe, but I would still suggest that you have others there to help you, because when a 25-year-old, if you cut off the reinforcer, in other words, if you stop giving in to a 25-year-old, they might get very aggressive. I don't know, because at this point, the individual will be frustrated and they will be asking themselves, this worked for 25 years. How come it's not working anymore? And what happens is what we call an extinction burst. So the minute you stop attending to or giving in, the minute you cut off the reinforcer, the individual's behavior accelerates. It gets worse before it dies off. So there's this extinction burst. Extinction means you're no longer attending to that behavior. And so basically the individuals, think about it from the person's point of view. They're thinking, this worked before. How come it's not working? Let me just yell louder. Let me scream a little bit harder. Let me hit. Let me do whatever it is so that they will give in again. And so it gets a little bit worse, and you have to stay with it. You have to continue not giving in, at which point gradually it starts to get less and less. And then the individual realizes that this isn't working for me anymore. And then they will find another behavior. And that's where it's more important for you to come in and actually model or prompt a new behavior. In other words, I will not give in to you when you scream and cry, but I will give in to you when you ask nicely. And that's the way it goes, is that you ignore or do not give in to challenging behaviors, but you heavily reward appropriate behaviors. And again, it's a lot easier when the child is younger. It's a lot harder when this pattern of behavior has gone on for a long time. And believe me, I know it is very, very difficult for parents. I myself had a very difficult time with this when my children were younger. At any time in life, it's hard. I mean, think about it. Sometimes our spouses might tantrum, and giving in is an easier way to deal with things. But in the long run, it's a very, very difficult thing.
Okay, we have an amazing opportunity right now because we have had one of our viewers who has identified previously as being on the autism spectrum, who's an adult, who's incredibly verbal and has written in with the flip side of this question. And they said, "Hi, Dr. Doreen, my question is about diets. My mother is trying to force me to change my eating habits, and I'm not happy about that. Yelling matches have occurred, etc. I know that it's good for my health, but my liver is, I think I know that it's not good for my health, but my liver is diseased and has problems. How can I, as an autistic person, handle it perfectly?" So we've got both sides of this equation here. So now, talking to the person on the spectrum, what do you want to say to them?
That's wonderful. And welcome, and it's nice to be able to communicate with someone who's on the spectrum. I always learn from individuals who are experiencing this. So I guess what I want to say is sometimes we feel that we don't want to do what's right because someone else is forcing us to do it. You being such a high-functioning individual, I think you need to take control of this yourself. I think you need to understand, and maybe that's what you're saying here, how eating foods that are unhealthy will have a negative impact on your health over time. Now, one of the things that is for all of us, it's a lesson, is that often we do things that give us a reward short term, but in the long term are not good for us. Eating unhealthy foods is one of those things. So you're eating something, it feels really good right now, but over time it's damaging your liver or causing other issues for you. So this is the time to take control of it. First, I want you to be convinced about that yourself. If you truly believe that eating unhealthy stuff is something you want to get away from, if you agree with that, then do it in a way that works for you. It doesn't have to be all or none. It doesn't have to be an immediate cutoff of everything that you like. No. What you do is you list all the things that you like on a piece of paper, and then ask your mom or someone else to help you make a green mark on the ones that are healthy and a red mark on the ones that are unhealthy. And then every week, replace one of the red ones with a green one. Just take your time. Do it over a period of months. And gradually give up those foods that are unhealthy. But make sure you replace them with something that you also like. Now, sometimes in the beginning, when it has to do with food, we don't really like the healthy foods. A lot of people will say, I prefer to have cake instead of fruit, let's say. But if you stay with it for a little while, you'll realize that if you give up cake for a little while, like let's say a month, then when you come back and you have cake, you'll feel pretty groggy. You won't feel very good because now your body is healthy and it doesn't want that junk anymore. When you're in the middle of it, your body is craving all this junk, right? And always remind yourself, and also, by the way, if you have a day when you've done really, really well and most of your foods are green foods, the ones that are healthy, then reward yourself in some other way. Find a reward that has nothing to do with food. Find an activity that has nothing to do with food. Try to keep yourself feeling rewarded by doing those other things. Sometimes when we eat unhealthy foods, it's because we are looking for a reinforcer. We're looking for a reward. We haven't found it in anything else. So I think that's my advice for this person.
I love that. And I just want to send everybody a hug, because I think whether you're on a spectrum or not on the spectrum, one of the things I've learned from you, Dr. Grampiche, is that food is a primary reinforcer,
Yep.
that we link it to other things. And I am a living example of that. And, you know, if you've been watching, we've been doing this show now we'll be starting our 10th year in the fall of doing this show. And you probably have watched my weight go up and down a few times. And so food is an issue for me. And I want to send everybody a hug. It's really hard,
Very hard.
To get into a place where you're eating healthily and staying eating healthily. On my spa vacation this year, I'm very proud of the fact that I've lost over 30 pounds.
Wow. Amazing.
But I still have a long way to go, because there was a long period of time when, you know, food became my reward for everything. Just being honest, because, you know, I like to keep it honest here. But I will tell you that this morning I was thinking about the fact that I'm a big nighttime eater, or I was, and that for 6 months I haven't been eating after 7 o'clock at night. And now I can't even imagine how gross I would feel if I did.
Wow.
And so I think, as Dr. Grampiche was saying, it takes time, because the reinforcer is so far removed from being healthy, especially if your weight is okay and it's just for your liver's sake, because you can't look at your liver every day and go, gosh, I see that improvement and it's worthwhile. So I encourage you to play this back and listen to Dr. Grampiche's advice. There are also all kinds of programs out there now that, I mean, depending on how you like to mask it, Weight Watchers does a thing where you have points and you keep track of the foods by points. Noom has a whole thing that's very similar to what Dr. Grampiche was using, and it's ABA. All Noom is ABA. I don't know if everybody realizes that. And they try to give you reinforcers as you go along. All of those things cost, but most of your health providers, if you go to your insurance, they'll give you a free app to do what Weight Watchers and Noom do in a slightly different way, and a way to track your progress. And they'll reward you with points and things like that to buy stuff from their store, because it makes sense for them. We all want to be healthier. So I sort of love that we got to hear the two sides of it, though, from the parent point of view of arguing with your child, and then adult child, and then what to do for an adult. So I kind of love that. But we have a desperate mom who has written in. And she says, I have a question for Dr. Grampiche. My son is 4.8 years old and has been having 30 hours of ABA therapy for 9 months now. He is speaking small sentences, but he gets random bouts of laughter, which are very difficult to control. We are treating yeast as well. Please help me, desperate mom. And she says, should I ignore it or respond when he's doing the laughter?
Yeah. So that's, and I appreciate that you wrote that you are treating yeast as well, because that's where I would go first. A lot of times when you see kind of this random laughter, almost as if the individual is drunk, it ends up being yeast. So I'm glad that you're treating it. Please keep in touch, frequent contact with your physician, because sometimes one antifungal medication has no effect on the child and another does. I know a lot of people who do really well on nystatin, and then some people who say nystatin did nothing for my child and I had to go on diflucan. You got to talk to your physician and make sure it's the yeast levels are being reduced. That being said, in the meantime, you ignore it. You do not, as a behaviorist, if you start to talk about it or respond or address it in any way, there's a likelihood that it will go up. It's important that you don't allow the bouts of laughter to delay the treatment, the ABA, and make sure all of your staff know that, or people who are working with him, or as you. Sometimes our kids realize that if I do something silly, it buys me more time. And so just if you have to kind of keep the speed up by maneuvering him through whatever it is you asked, do that, but don't address the laughter itself.
And I would love to know what you're doing to treat the yeast. If you are doing, a drug treatment or if you're just trying to do it dietarily, I can tell you that we battled with yeast for many years, and we would get it semi under control, and then, we would lose our grip on it. So there were several times that we had to cycle back. And it became clear to me that in our case, and all cases are different, right? Because each one of our kiddos is their own ecosystem. But it became clear to me that for us, for a period of time, we had to sugar had to be gone completely from his diet, as well as artificial colors and flavors. But we had to limit the amount of fruit intake that he had as well, and the amount of carb intake. That did not mean that we put him totally on a, crazy keto, like no carbs. But, it was a lot of work for a couple of years, but we saw that it would make a huge difference, that he would be able to focus when we had the yeast under control. So, we just look away. She says he says to himself, "Stop laughing," but then he continues. They are doing diet, also nystatin.
Okay, so a couple of things on that feedback. As I said, just make sure the nystatin is working for him. Nystatin is extremely light antifungal medication. You can give nystatin to 1-month-old babies. In fact, we do when they have thrush. But so what I want to suggest is two things. One is, so make sure you talk to your physician, first of all, about the medication and make sure it's working. But more importantly, if he's saying to himself, "Stop laughing," that means someone has said that to him, which is not what I recommend you do. As I said, do not address the laughing. Nobody should actually say to him, "Stop laughing." And also, you should not look away, because by looking away, he is getting a delay in the treatment or the program. So please don't do that either. Keep working through whatever it is, as it pretend the laughter never happened. Just pretend like it's not happening at all. Keep moving on, move forward. If he laughs instead of answering a question that you're asking him, then go about your life and come back and ask the question again. If he laughs instead of doing something that you just asked him to do, physically maneuver him to actually do the thing you asked him to do. Act like the laughter is not happening.
Okay. Stephanie would like to know, how can adults who are diagnosed with autism as adults learn social skills? Also, are there resources available for those who are diagnosed as adults? In my research, it seems like if you were diagnosed as an adult, your diagnosis is less legitimate. That breaks my heart.
Yeah, it does. I understand it, and it is true. I would say you're right, and I'll tell you why people don't take it as seriously. There's, I think, two reasons. First of all, one is that if you are diagnosed as an adult, by definition, that means that you don't have a very severe case, because if you did, someone would have noticed it earlier in childhood, right? So in that sense, there is a big difference when this is a huge spectrum, and you have, on the highest functioning level, you have an adult who has social issues and therefore does fall on the spectrum. But on this side, of the other end of the spectrum, you have, let's say, a child who cannot even communicate his or her needs. And so that's the more severe portion of the spectrum. And our hope, of course, is that all the folks on, excuse me, on the more severe side will gradually, with the help of all interventions, especially ABA, move towards the lighter side of the spectrum, right? And that's what we hope to accomplish. For you as an adult, I understand how it feels, because you're still struggling with certain things and you want people to take notice of that and understand that. The other unfortunate thing is that there are people right now, believe it or not, who pretend to have these issues. I've actually had a couple of people try to get a diagnosis from me, and I would not give them the diagnosis, simply because they had other issues going on, not autism, but for instance, they had social anxiety. And that in itself is a very important disorder and problem to get a hold of and handle, but it isn't ASD. So now going back to your original question, which is how do you get help for it? It's just like anything else. I want you to look at it like anything else. Let's say someone as an adult has a problem understanding, I don't know, math or balancing their checkbook or driving or whatever it is. You specifically focus and try to do work on that particular area. Now, I will tell you that we have, and Shannon, you often say this, we have listed all the different ways that we work with social skills in our skills curriculum. And I really want to recommend to you that you look at our skills program, our skills curriculum. It's online. So www.skillsforautism.com. In fact, feel free to even call the skills company and tell them your situation. There is a particular version of skills that we built years ago. I don't know if it's out there right now, but it was actually only the advanced programs. So they included social skills, cognitive skills, executive functioning skills, and those are probably the areas of our lessons, of our curriculum that you want to take a look at. Just go through them, just go through the questionnaires or go through those lessons and see if any of them pertain to you. Whenever I look through skills, there's like, especially in the executive functioning section, I'm like, oh, that's a good plan. I got to do that myself. And there's a lot of stuff in there that's helpful. If you don't find things that are helpful, then you need to go to the adult version of skills, which also has a social section. But I'm pretty certain you'll be able to find some things that are useful to you. And those are lessons. And those just, it's like, you know, practice this activity. First, rehearse it on your own, and then find someone who is going to engage with you, and then you can practice it with them and those types of things. The other thing I want to say is that, like everything else, social skills increase when we find a group of individuals who have similar interests. So I don't know what you're interested in, but if you do have something that you like, I don't care what it is. Could be cooking, it could be robotics. It really doesn't matter. Something that you are interested in. These days you can go online and you can find others who have the same interest. And make sure you engage with them, get involved with their activities, with clubs, with memberships, online activities. And that is the easiest way to get social skills going.
There you go. Since you brought up skills, it's time for my weekly reminder about what Skills is offering for free right now for our audience. Want to remind you, I'm going to give you the phone number now, and then I'm going to give it at the end. So if you have pen and paper ready right now, the phone number is 877-975-4559. But Skills, every week they have something during the pandemic that they're offering to our community here watching the show for free. So this week for ABA parents and guardians, they say they will continue to offer our free IBT parent e-learning course, Parent Getting Started. For the educator community, we will continue to offer our IBT educator e-learning module, Educator Getting Started, available at no charge. All of these are. And then they will continue to offer their RBT, which is Registered Behavior Technician 2.0 training course, free for the parent audience on a case-by-case basis. In addition, we will continue to offer the 10% discount on all Skills products for anyone that says that they have come from watching Autism Live when they call the office. Again, the phone number is 877-975-4559. I want to encourage you to call that and say that you saw it on Autism Live and that you want the friends and family discount, Shannon's friends and family discount. My family is large. My tribe is large and beautiful. And I hope that you will check that out. I think that sometimes, as Dr. Grampiche was saying, just reading the lesson. I remember being an adult and for the first time reading the lesson on ending a conversation, and I went, oh my gosh, this is what's been wrong my entire life. I just didn't know this one little piece. And I'm still working on it. I'm not great at it, but it's helped me tremendously just reading the lesson. So I do want to point out that there is skills and then there is skills living. And skills is, if anybody is under the age, it's somewhere between 12 and 14, they encourage people to transition over to skills living. But as Dr. Grampiche said, there is another part of skills where they just pull out those 3 levels, the cognition, the executive function, and the social skills. So talk with them about that. Tell them what it is that you're looking for and have that conversation with them. I'm sure that they will be happy to steer you in the right direction. And feel free to ask them, what's available to me for free today? There's no harm in asking, right? That's always a good thing. I also want to acknowledge that Parker said in the community also self-diagnosis is not legitimate. And I want to speak briefly to what you were saying, Dr. Grampiche, that part of the problem right now is that in our quest for awareness of what autism is, many people looked at that and went, oh, I think that's me. And some very notable people have said that, and they've taken a lot of grief for it in public. I remember when Jerry Seinfeld said, I think I'm a little bit on the spectrum, and the world screamed at him for having said that. And he said, I didn't mean it the way it sounded, but it is now, as much as I love that Amy Schumer was so fabulous and her husband is so fabulous and that they allowed us to see what it was like as he was getting a diagnosis. But there have been many people who are like, ooh, I've had every girlfriend I know call me and say, I think that's my husband. And while I don't mean to laugh, there's a big difference between having an autism spectrum disorder and not noticing when your wife does something. There's a big difference. So not saying that people shouldn't attempt to get the diagnosis, but it is rampant right now for many good reasons why people are saying that they have a diagnosis, which then waters it down for the people who do. And that's the difficult part. But in any case, okay, I want to get to this question. My son is finally starting ABA services again in home since COVID began. He is 12. It's 5 days a week, 2 hours per day. He's doing a focused program. He is starting vision therapy next week. Vision therapy wants to work on fixation and convergence. Do you know if there are any programs/goals I can ask his BCBA for to aid with those vision therapy goals?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so of course there are. And in fact, if you look in our skills curriculum, again, in the motor section, and you will be looking at skills developing, which is that what it's called these days? The younger
skills living.
Skills.
No. No, I think isn't it just called skills regular?
Well, skills for the younger population. Even though he's 12, you should look at the skills for childhood. That one has a section called motor, and in the motor section there's a section called visual motor, and in there you will find activities for convergence. We call it bipolarity, but there's a lot of stuff in there that will be very useful to you. Now, having said that, he's only receiving a total of 10 hours a week of ABA. If they are working, if the vision therapists are going to be working on fixation and convergence, great. You should have your ABA team working on other stuff, because I'm sure there are other things that he needs as well. And you might ask yourself, what are those other things? So the way that skills works is you start with an assessment. You start with a questionnaire. We call it the skills index. Online, you will be asked lots and lots and lots of questions. And those questions help identify all the areas that he is below his own age. So I think that's something that parents find very interesting as well. I remember when my kids were just born, I loved those books, What to Expect in the First Year, What to Expect, all that. And those books, the section that I really liked, Shannon, was like they had a little chart that would just say, these are kind of the milestones that you want to make sure are met at this age. And I would always go there and I'd be like, okay, well, she met this or he met this, and it was very broad, but nevertheless, it helps me identify if we're falling behind somehow. So I think for parents, it's kind of a fun exercise anyway to just go in there and answer those questions. I know it's time consuming, and you can actually select by domain. You don't have to answer all the questions. You could just look at language questions or social or play or whatever it is. Because what ends up happening is you end up seeing all the different areas that you still need to work on. And and those are kind of fun. Or you can also see where sometimes our kids are just super advanced in one area or another. So I think it's really good to do that. That'll help you identify things that your child needs to work on. And then you should have your ABA team working on those so that you have a little bit of a broader program.
Yeah. And I want to check. I don't know if it's this mom. I know there have been a couple of times that I've sent. There's something called an iPort that is a way that you can be, because a lot of times when you're doing visual therapy, they'll ask you to come to the office, and that's really hard in COVID. And sometimes you just live far away. When we were doing visual therapy, we couldn't get to the office, and so we had the choice of purchasing something called an iPort. They stopped making them for about 5 years. They're making them again, and they're a little bit less expensive than they were before. So if you're looking for visual therapy, it does like 100 different exercises, and it's kind of cool. It looks like a Star Wars thing, and you put on these glasses that look like they're 3D glasses, and then you have to flip them around and do them the other way. It was tough to get my son to do them until we had a reward system for it. But once we had a reward system, he was happy to do it, and it really, really helped him good. I did send the iPort to you before. Wonderful. But we also use the lessons in skills as well. So, but I love that you suggested doing the visual therapy when you're doing the visual therapy and working on all the other stuff with your therapist, because 10 hours is just, it's not that much. Yeah. So
I also want to say, Shannon, that the vast majority of like games, online gaming, and so on, still also work on visual skills. What you need to do is, like convergence, for instance, being able to focus both eyes on one stimulus. Once you get into visual therapy or even look on skills and they give you a bunch of activities, you'll see the type of thing you're doing, like the type of exercise that is done for that. And then you can go to games, just like online games, like PS or Xbox or whatever, and see what types of things produce the same result. Like there are games that are also going to be working on things like conversions, tracking, bipolarity, etc. And so that's another way to get your child to improve with visual skills.
I would be willing to bet, especially all that, what do you call it, the VR stuff. It's a very interesting thing. Okay. We also had somebody write in about their child who was diagnosed last year at 6, and they said, I need help. Maybe a list of things to do to help her and help myself. I'm at my wit's end. When she has her meltdowns, she hits, she screams, throws things. I don't know what I should do.
Got it. Okay, so we're just going to give a kind of like an overall series of things that you should look into. And the first one, obviously, is ABA. You need to get in touch with an ABA company wherever you are and get a program going immediately. For us at CARD, 6 is right around the time when we can still get comprehensive programs from payers being your insurance company. And it is very hard to get 40-hour programs approved once the child is older. It's not an exact cutoff. Every insurance company has their own stuff, but I really do recommend that you try to get your funding going. So you contact your health insurance and you say, I would like an ABA program, and they'll tell you what's required. Sometimes some of the payers will require you to get a diagnosis from your physician, or a recommendation or referral or prescription from your physician saying your child needs ABA. Once you get that, you then get connected to an ABA organization. Now get going on this fast because it takes a little while to get started. As I said, you have to do these types of assessments, like ours at CARD is skills. And you will do that assessment so we can identify like what kinds of strengths your child has and what kinds of areas they need help in. Then the ABA organization will get a program going. In the meantime, once you've gotten that started, you can also get together with a physician. Sometimes, depending on if your child has dietary issues, gastrointestinal issues, sleep issues, those are types of things that you want to make sure you deal with early on, because if your child's not sleeping, if your child has a lot of bloating, is uncomfortable, has constipation, all these types of things, you'd be surprised what a significant effect all of that has on your child's ability to learn. So make sure you're dealing with all of that kind of stuff. If you want help figuring out where to find a physician, online, there's an organization called MedMaps, and they have listed physicians all over the country who are kind of trained in a more holistic type of intervention. Many of those folks are kind of naturopaths or homeopaths, but then there's also just Western medicine physicians on there, but they are all looking to boost your child's immune system. They're all working to try to reduce toxins from your child's life. And by that means making your child healthier so that he or she can learn faster. So I think the two main things are make sure your child's biology is sort of stabilized, so the child's healthy and able to learn very fast. And then you look at ABA. Now, if your child has a lot of gastrointestinal inflammation, your physician will tell you that, and then you'll need to also get involved with a dietitian or nutritionist who can help you select the right foods. On the other side, if your child has problems picking up speech, you might need speech therapy as well. And finally, if your child has issues with either gross or fine motor skills or proprioceptive skills, like you might need a little bit of occupational therapy. That's the full array. So we're talking, generally speaking, a lot of people have a very intensive ABA program. They have a physician who can monitor the child. They might have a dietitian or nutritionist, and they might also have speech or occupational therapy. And that's pretty much it, I think. Right, Shannon?
Yeah, can we talk for just a second about the hours? Because not only is this, it's come up with this parent's question, but also the parent that was asking about the 12-year-old getting 2 hours a day. She wrote back and she said, he's 12. I thought that at this age, 2 hours a day was a good amount. He's also homeschooled for 2 hours a day. And I think, there's nobody better than you to talk about what can be accomplished in what amount of time.
Yeah. So, I'll go back and say that this will show how old I am. In 1984, we published a paper at UCLA, which was the original paper that changed the world of ABA. And that's really important because that paper was the reason, it's the seminal study still to this day in the field of behavioral medicine. And it has to do with what we did is we were, for many years, from like the late 70s to the early 80s, we were kind of working with patients, with individuals who had the diagnosis of autism. And let me tell you, it was pretty severe in some cases because this was before deinstitutionalization. And so we were working with children who had been placed in Camarillo State Hospital, and that was very severe. So what we did was we had a group of children who were able to come to UCLA, right? So they were close enough where our students, we used our students at UCLA and we trained them to do therapy, just like right now ABA organizations train their behavior technicians. And so these students would work with the children. And if you were really close to UCLA, you'd get a lot of hours because these therapists, these students would come to your house. You could also come to UCLA and you'd get tons of therapy. If you were living pretty far from UCLA, you'd get less therapy because we didn't have students who would be able to drive all the way down to, let's say, hours away from UCLA. So naturally, this ended up producing for us two groups of children. And we made sure that the groups are equal in their IQ and their language ability and all of that. And so the children who were closer to UCLA were getting about 40 hours per week of ABA from us. And those who were further out were getting about 10 hours per week of ABA, like the individual who had written in earlier. And these children were all they had all entered the program around the age of 3.5, and they were all aged between 3.5 and 6. Okay. And then there was a third group of children that we also measured who were kids who were same age, same functioning level, but they were on the other side of UCLA was an area called Neuropsychiatric Institute. Now it's called SEML. And they used to do other types of interventions. And those kids were getting 10 hours of other types of interventions. So what we did is after about 2.5 years, we looked back, and of the group who had received 40 hours per week for 2.5 years, half of those children had attained normal IQ, and they were now in first grade, and they were functioning extremely well alone without an aid in first grade. So for all practical purposes, and as independent psychiatrists removed their diagnosis of autism, half of those kids. So actually, to be accurate, 47%. Of the other two groups who had received 10 hours, only one child made it, and that was 2%. So it was 47% of the ones who received intensive therapy, 2% of the ones who received 10 hours. So that's where it becomes very obvious. That was the first study that pointed to hours, intensity being the key as point in ABA. We call it now dosage, right? So if I recommend for your child, let's say 20 milligrams of a medication, but you only give them 2 milligrams, what kind of result are you going to get? Just think of it that way. Are you going to get the result that is expected from that medication? Same thing with ABA. If I recommend 10 hours, 15, 20, 30 hours, and you only give them 2 hours, it's just not going to work. And the more needs the child has, the higher the intensity should be. Now, the problem is funding for intensive therapy cuts out around the age 6 to 8. A lot of the payers don't really want to fund a child who's, let's say, starting at age 8 for 40 hours. Why? Because from their perspective, it's virtually impossible to teach all the things that you need to teach to an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old. And it's probably pretty close to being accurate, to be honest with you. But it's a different thing when you're working with a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, because you still have enough time to teach all the things you need to change behavior. But that being said, I think another parent had written in that they're doing what's called a focused program. Focused programs can go on forever, even in adulthood, and they are very, very effective. What a focused program is that we're not working on every area. We're working on a focus. We have on a particular area like social skills or language or vocational or severe challenging behaviors. Whatever it is, we're focusing on just that one thing. So I don't know if that's what you meant me to go through, Shannon.
Yeah, I mean, I always appreciate that. But I also think, too, that you talked about this a couple of weeks ago in a way that I think lit up a lot of people's brains, and they were like, "Oh, okay, I got it." That somebody was saying, "Well, I need for what I want my child to do. We need to work on toilet training, and we're having tantrums, and we need to build speech, and we're doing 12 hours a week." And you were saying, "I don't have enough hours to get all that done. We're going to have to pick two of those things, and it's going to take us 6 months to do this as opposed to two." And people were like, "What?"
Yeah.
And everybody went like, it takes a certain number of hours to toilet train. It takes a certain number of hours weekly to work on speech. And you kind of went through this thing and said, if I have 40 hours, I can work on it all. If I have 30 hours, I can work on these things. If I have 20 hours, I just like for people to think of it that way. That if I only have 10 hours, I can only accomplish a certain amount. And that might be okay.
And that amount has a lot to do with the child's functioning level as well, which is why it's really hard for us to write a prescription and say every child needs X amount. Because if your child is learning extremely fast, then and I have 40 hours, I might only need that. I mean, I have literally, let's be honest, I have recovered children in 18 months. Because the child was just a really rapid learner, and we figured out what the child needed in order to be fully attentive and aware and so on and learn fast, okay? On the other hand, I've also recovered individuals, but it took 10 years. So, you know, it just has to do with how fast the individual is learning and how many things they still need to master. It's really that simple. So you start with the assessments that I mentioned, and you see all the areas that you need to work on. And each of those areas will take some time, and that has to do with your child's ability. And, you know, so when I have a 40-hour program, I could probably focus on about average of about 20 lessons at any given time. But if I have a 10-hour program, I'm probably going to only focus on about 7 or 8 lessons. So that's the issue. And you need to be that your BCBA, your board certified behavior analyst, should be able to help you with that.
Okay. I want to get to a question, and it's coming from Canada. And I also want to mention to you, Dr. Granpeesheh, that during the break, we had many people write in from Canada and ask if you would be willing to go and talk to the Prime Minister in Canada, because the state of ABA in Canada is dire. Yeah. And there are many things that we love about Canada, and Canada seems to have figured out, but ABA does not appear to be one of them. So if we can get you over there to talk to the very handsome Prime Minister, I would be very happy if we could make that happen. And
so, I mean, let me just address that as well. In fact, I do go to Canada pretty frequently because my husband is Canadian. So I go to the Toronto area pretty frequently. In fact, I've even been there during COVID. I'm going back there in March. So I would be delighted to talk to whoever to help get ABA in Canada. I also know, like, I've also given a lot of speeches in Canada for different organizations, and I pretty much know Autism Canada and all the different organizations that provide ABA or talk about ABA. So I'm happy to help in any way that I can. I agree with you. The medical situation in Canada with health insurance doesn't really help. There is some funding, but the wait lists for it are so long in Canada that you basically, your child misses the window of opportunity. So yeah, please, anytime anybody wants to get me connected with the powers that may be, whether it's the Prime Minister or whoever else, I'm happy to help.
Okay. They've written in and said, and they would like for you to meet their son. They've got a 4-year-old with severe and receptive speech delay, struggling to follow directions and putting objects. They say on mouth, but I wonder if that is in mouth, because I think that's slightly different. And how to help. Thank you. Yeah. And they are in Toronto. So the next time you go, I think they would like to meet up with you. But can you tell us, since you're right there, do you mean on mouth or in mouth? Because that, to me, that's vastly different. Do you disagree, Dr. Granpeesheh?
No, it is very different.
So if you could just clarify that for us, but any help,
Yeah,
obviously,
I mean,
prefer that they start ABA.
yeah, absolutely. And I'd be happy to see your child. I don't know if I'm going to Toronto this trip. I go to Cambridge, just so you know. You probably know where that is, being a Canadian from Ontario. And I'd be happy to see your child. And see, yeah, so they're writing in mouth also bites on wrists. Yeah, I have to follow up with some folks that I know in the Toronto area who were developing schools and it's on my list to do. See what they've managed to accomplish. I don't know if anybody's managed to do much in the past year, but I definitely will follow up with them.
Okay. But in the meantime, for her, what do you have any advice for a child who is putting things in mouth, because that gets very scary,
Yeah.
biting the wrists?
Yeah, for sure. So, first of all, let me just say there are behavior analysts in that area, especially in Toronto. And I wonder if we can do everything we can to try to connect you to some of them. Because this type of behavior, what you have to do is first you have to first of all, with any behavior, you have to identify the function first. So, and that means what is causing this? Why is the child doing this? And here you've listed two different behaviors: biting on wrists and putting objects in mouth. Now, putting objects in mouth, if they're things that are not food, and depending on whether or not the child swallows them, this would be referred to as pica. And yes, it can be very dangerous. But for either one of those behaviors, you start with figuring out when it happens, under what circumstances it happens, what type of stimulus, let's say, they put in the mouth, do they swallow it? And last but not least, what do I do? What usually do people do when this behavior happens? So it's like antecedents, define the behavior, and what are the consequences? And all of this stuff exists on skills in a section called CIFA, which stands for Card Indirect Functional Assessment. And they ask you a lot of questions there online about the behavior, and then depending on your answers, it will connect you to a section called BIP Builder, which means Behavior Intervention Plan Builder. And that will tell you exactly what to do for that specific behavior based on the function. So I can't tell you what to do today because I don't know the function of these behaviors. It's possible that the child needs vitamins or zinc, and that a lot of kids do that when they have pica, but it is also a behavior. It is also a behavior that has become a habit. So we need to deal with it in a functional way. So please, the first thing you can do is go online, get on the skills website, answer the CIFA, and get the BIP, get the behavior intervention plan, and then try to get people who are trained in ABA to implement that plan. I'd say probably, I want to say 70% of my kids who put objects in their mouth, it has nothing to do with vitamins at all or deficiency, at least 70% of them. So, and also biting on wrists. Very frequently, something like biting on wrist ends up being a frustration thing that the child does that freaks out the parent, and the parent backs off. And so it becomes an effective way of getting the parent to back off. On the other hand, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. We need to find out the function and then treat the behavior according to the function. So I can't give you feedback until I know exactly why it's happening.
Yeah, and just I want to point out the other part of it too that we always miss as parents is that it is happening for a reason.
Yeah.
And so when Dr. Granpeesheh is talking about finding out what the reason is, and then we have to make sure that whatever need it is that was being met by the biting, they can get met in another way. That's the part parents always leave out.
Yes.
Is that it's a vital need that's being met by them doing this. And we're not just trying to take that away. We're trying to find something that's functional to replace it with. So if he's biting, a wrist because he wants to get out of something, we want to teach him the way to say, I need a break. I'd like to wait. I'm nervous, whatever it is that he needs to convey. It isn't just take it away, because a lot of times parents just miss that part of it.
That's right. And I see the parent wrote saying that, yes, I think he is frustrated because he's not verbal. If that's the case, you need to get him on a picture exchange communication system like PEX, so that his frustration goes down because he can now communicate. Communication is super important for our kids.
Okay. And unfortunately, we're out of time. Just as somebody wrote in and said their child is obsessed with animals and how do you deal with obsessions? And I would love to talk about that for an hour, because that seems like a really great thing to be obsessed about. And I want to remind everybody that the line between obsession and passion for something that will be a lifelong thing is very slim. And that if we can direct things, we have kids who are obsessed with slamming doors. Now, I'm not saying that there's no job that you could get where that would be involved, but it's harder. But having an obsession with animals, man, my head goes right to career.
Absolutely. And we can talk more about obsessions and passions next show, Shannon, as well.
That would be great. We did have somebody write in about looking for a job and help with looking for a job in the Valley. I just want to point out that tomorrow on the show, we have self-advocate Jordan Kamnitzer and his girlfriend, Tony Kent. They are both self-advocates, and they have been dealing with the employment piece. Jordan has been in a job for over 30 years, but is unemployed in COVID, and we're going to be talking about precisely that topic with him and Tony tomorrow, so you'll want to tune in for that. Dr. Granpeesheh, I know you got to go, but we just adore you. It's so lovely to have you back here in this new year.
See everyone.
Thank you so much. Everybody else, we'll see you back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Three, 4, 5, 6, 7. The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're here with our very special guest, Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, for Ask Dr. Doreen. We're so thrilled to be here with you and live this wonderful Wednesday morning on the 3rd of January, 2021. Can you believe that we're already in February? It's crazy. But thrilled that we are here with you, and Dr. Granpeesheh is here and she's ready to start answering questions for you guys. Let's really quickly go through some of the places that you might be watching us. Right now, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, and Twitter, as well as a bunch of other sites we are live on now that we've just joined a bunch more places. So very excited to be live in more places. And we want to encourage you, wherever you're watching us live, you are connected so that if you write in the chat from that platform, it comes right through to us so that Dr. Granpeesheh and I can see your questions. We're going to try to answer as many questions as we can Please be patient. We don't ever, good morning, mama. We don't, and I'm going to get to your question in just a second, but we are not going to be able to get to all the questions, but we're going to do our level best to get to as many as we possibly can. Good morning, Bonnie. And if you're watching us later in the day or later in the week or the year or the decade, whatever, the century, you might be watching us on any of the places that you get your podcasts. We're on all of them. If you find that is not true, please alert us, because we believe that we are now on all platforms where you can get your podcast and download us for free. And I'm very excited that we're still able to bring that to you, free download of all of our podcasts. Please visit our website, autism-live.com, to when you're watching in podcast, you can leave chats in there for us. In fact, the starter questions that we have are things that were left in the chat on our website, and we appreciate you writing in there. But also, when you're there, take a look at all the different videos that you can find. You can search topics. You can search all of the Ask Dr. Doreens. We've been doing this show now. This is our 10th year, which is like crazy, right? So super exciting to bring you that level of library. Dr. Graham-Pichet, welcome. I've overtalked you, but welcome. And we're so thrilled to be here with you this morning.
Thank you, Shannon. Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be back. We were not able to do a few shows over the last few months, but it's really lovely to be back and seeing all the questions popping up. And thanks so much, everyone.
Yes, I really love it. We're saying good morning to Just May, and we're saying good morning to Christina. And Mama, I am going to get to your question in just a second. I want to, though, you alerted me to something, Dr. Graham-Pichet, the other day, that the Peers group is getting ready to start some new classes online that are going to be open to people around the world. We want to get the word out and tell people that if you are interested in having your child do the Peers program, which we absolutely love, and it's a great program. It teaches social skills. They're starting a new program. So later on the show, I'm going to give you where you need to go for that. Make sure that you stay tuned for that. Okay. So I want to jump in really quickly, Dr. Graham-Pichet, with a question that was sent to us during the week. Abigail wants to know, hi, my son just turned 3 years old. He has Denver, which I believe is the Denver Early Start model, but only 12 hours a week. And we can tell it's not enough. If we start now with 30 hours a week, now that he's 3, will he still have a chance to get, and their phrase is to get out of the spectrum? So do you want to talk about 12 hours versus 30 hours?
Yes, and I also want to talk about the Denver model a little bit. So I just want the person who wrote in and all of our viewers to understand that the Denver model is not the pure ABA model. The Denver model was developed in the last, I'd say, decade, and it is, and it was later kind of stated that it is one of the ABA models. I'm not sure that I would agree with that. There are aspects to the Denver model that are behavioral in nature, but I don't know that it meets all the criteria to be defined as ABA. And so it's kind of important. The reason that's important is that if you're doing the Denver model and it's working for your child, wonderful. But I don't want you to think that you are doing a pure ABA program. It's very different. And all the studies you have to realize, because this parent wrote and said, you know, if I increase my hours, will it get my child out of the diagnosis? And you have to realize that all the studies that showed recovery from the diagnosis or losing symptoms of the diagnosis had to do with pure ABA models, and they were done all the way back to the 80s, right? So 87 was the first study, And then after that, there were replications that occurred in the 90s and all the way through, I think our replication or recovery study was in the late 90s. And I'm not sure if the Denver model has any kind of study published that shows actual recovery. In other words, that the intensity and their model was focused on enough symptoms that it resulted in the individual losing their diagnosis. I don't think that happened. I know that the Denver model does have a lot of research behind it to show that it is effective, but I don't know if it ever resulted in recovery. So that's something important for you as a parent to decide. Now, if you were doing a pure kind of more ABA focused model, that means if it was something like discrete trial merged with natural environment training, that type of model, I would say yes, increasing hours definitely makes a huge difference. In fact, hours are the number one, they're kind of like the prescription, the dosage has to do with hours, and it is a huge difference. I mean, there are a lot of factors that make a difference, but hours are definitely the number one factor.
Okay. So I hope that for that parent, that you will take that and write us another question. I want to get to the question that I said we would get to that Mama wrote in, wanting to know how to deal with depression. My son, autistic, 10 years old, is most of the time depressed. How can I deal with this?
Yeah. So, when I first read the question, how to deal with depression, I thought you might be referring to yourself as a parent, because a lot of our parents go through that. And that is honestly harder to deal with than if you are dealing with a 10-year-old. And the reason is that, so I was happy when I saw the second question, which is like you're asking about your son. So when it comes to children, unfortunately, their lives are a little bit less burdened, I guess, than ours. And they have fewer responsibilities, and the whole process is just simpler when it's a 10-year-old. So what you have to do is, and this is a good exercise for anyone, not just an individual who thinks their child is depressed, but everyone, every parent should do this, because it's very helpful to have an idea of what are the things that are rewarding and or not rewarding in our children's lives, right? So you start with just kind of identifying what are the things that your child enjoys, right? So, and we call those obviously reinforcers. There's, we could send you, or you could look online, and there's reinforcement inventories online. And these are important because there's things on there that you wouldn't even think of, right? So you might think, for instance, that only food or only praise or that sort of stuff. But there's a million things that are rewarding to our children. And it's important to think about those things. For example, just being left alone is rewarding, or just being given an opportunity to have a quiet time, or those types of things. So you establish a list of what are the things that are rewarding, and then you establish a list of things that are difficult. So what are the things that are too demanding or cause a lot of like stress for my child, or it's difficult for my child to do these things, or they make my child not feel good about himself, right? So maybe they could be things like I don't know, his language lessons, his math homework, just spending time with other people because it's so loud, spending time with children because they might not understand him and he might feel left out. So all the things that are negative, right? And then do a schedule of his week and figure out when are the things that are happening, like what's going on in his life, write his entire schedule, and which one, and then like put a plus or a minus next to the activities, right? So like, he wakes up, that's okay. That's not too negative an experience for him because he has breakfast, right? And that's maybe a reward. So that's a plus. But then right after that, he has to do homework, and maybe that's a minus, or he has to go to school, or whatever it is, depending on where you are in the world. So try to identify the things that are not pleasant and the things that are pleasant. And so the days, and whenever you have an activity that is demanding or makes him feel not so good about himself, stressful, confusing, hard, embarrassing, whatever it is that's negative, follow it with one of those rewards that you listed the other day on the other list, right? So you have these, so he has a very demanding math program or whatever. So I want to make sure that on the days that he has math, right after that, he gets 20 minutes, 30 minutes of one of these things that was rewarding to him, like playing on the computer or running outside or whatever it is. So what you're doing is you're reorganizing his daily schedule in a way that it becomes fair. And I always say that because a lot of times as parents or as teachers, we're very focused on, I have a limited time, I got to teach this thing, I got to make him change in that way, I have to, he needs to be toilet trained, he needs to be talking, he needs to be socializing, he needs all this stuff, right? And we don't realize that it all adds up and it becomes overwhelming for the child. And so it's really, really important to put it down on paper and from his perspective, determine which is rewarding and which is demanding or difficult, and then balance the day and balance the week and make sure that there's a lot of reward. Now, once you've balanced it, go back and add 10% more reinforcers. Like increase the reward, make it so that your child is enjoying every moment, because I promise you, they will learn a lot more when they're happy, when they're have something to work towards. Now, a lot of our kids will also need, everything I said is simpler said than done, I guess. So a lot of our kids will need visual reminders of these things, that if you work hard for the next 30 minutes, here's a timer, we're going to get this reward, here's a picture of it. Somehow visually, so that they know what they're working towards. Because remember, our kids don't necessarily have the same intrinsic self-rewarding system that other kids do, right? They don't work in order to make you proud because making you proud is their number one reward. That isn't necessarily the case with a lot of our kids. It is with some of our kids, but other kids need other types of rewards. So I think that's the best way to get your child out of depression, is to kind of make their life a little bit more rewarding in whatever way you can. In fact, that holds true for all of us, right? But we just get very confused when we're talking about ourselves. It's hard to balance our own lives. And we have so many responsibilities and burdens, I guess, that it's hard to also add in rewards.
And I think COVID has just made it harder, because a lot of the things that we could default to reward ourselves and to reward our kids aren't available right now. So I think that that's made it harder. But it's also, I don't know about everybody else, but it's made me more mindful about it. That, oh my gosh, like what else can we do? And we almost, we have to schedule it.
Yeah.
We have to schedule that. Otherwise, it's hard for all of us.
Now, I do also, Shannon, want to point out, I'm a big believer, when you study all the literature on things like depression and anxiety, you learn that there are always two ways to handle these types of issues. One is through biological means, and one is through behavioral means or cognitive behavioral means. And the studies all indicate that the most successful group are the people who do both. So you can be someone who is doing all of these behavioral things that I mentioned, and your child continues to feel depressed. It's time for you to consult with a psychiatrist, or even just his developmental pediatrician or someone, because there's a whole nother side to this, which is the biology of depression and anxiety. And chemically, we become imbalanced simply because our environment is not providing to us the nutrients we need for our neurotransmitters to function correctly. And it's the truth is, you know, in the old days, like when there was enough bacteria in our environment, we all had very healthy guts and our neurotransmitter levels were functioning great, and we had enough serotonin, enough dopamine, enough norepinephrine that we would never get depressed or anxious, or fewer people did. And so that has changed. And we currently have a lot of people, and as Shannon said, COVID was not an easy period. A lot of people are going through depression. And aside from all these behavioral or cognitive behavioral methodologies, I am a very strong supporter of medications that help with depression and anxiety. There are many medications. The primary group, obviously, is the serotonin or norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, so SSRIs or SNRIs, and they are very, very helpful. And they're not, this is not something scary, folks, honestly, because all these medications do is they allow your body to absorb your own neurotransmitters a little bit better. So, you know, those medications also help just kind of lighten the load when it comes to what we're all going through in life right now.
Have you ever seen, there's a video that they've been able to, with an incredible microscope, they've been able to look at, and it looks like this alien life form that's a ball that has legs, and it looks like it's dragging something. And what it actually is that process that you were just describing, and it's literally your body dragging something, and they say this is what happiness looks like, is when your body is able to transmit this particular, whatever that thing is transmitting, that is what creates happiness. It's this crazy video. I could watch it forever, but to look at it and go, oh, that's what happiness actually looks like. Incredible. The question that came in, and I don't know, you may have already answered it, but Christina B wants to know is, will the answer that you're giving to Mama for depression, does that also work for anxiety? And you said that you included anxiety. So is that sort of a carte blanche?
Yeah. So in terms of medication, the medication for anxiety and depression is the same thing. It's exactly we use antidepressants for anxiety. So they're the exact same medication. But in terms of behavioral techniques, there are other things you can do behaviorally for anxiety. Obviously, when our environment is a little bit more rewarding, we tend to have less anxiety. But anxiety is a little bit different. It has more to do with apprehension. It has to do with, fear. Whereas depression has to do more with hopelessness. And so fear there are antecedent modifications, I guess, that you could put in place that would assist the individual with their fear. And those are things like, repetition, practice, getting the individual, we always talk about our kids have a hard time with transitions, right? So as you know, Shannon, there are lots and lots of ways that we help our children transition from one situation to another. Why do we do that? Because we don't want them to have anxiety. We don't want to flood them with something that is fearful to them or overwhelming to them. And so with anxiety, it's a lot about that. It's a lot about, again, you can go through the child's in particular kind of daily schedule, and see and identify, if you can, identify the situations that cause fear in the child, that cause sort of, I will not succeed at this, and practice those situations ahead of time. This is why a lot of times parents will ask me, well, why shouldn't I put my child in school? It'll help him with social skills. And I tell them it will help them if they've already learned all the skills necessary, so that when they're put in that situation, it doesn't become an anxiety-provoking and failing type of situation. So with anxiety, I think a lot of it has to do with rehearsal, practice, just being able to identify that you will be good enough at this activity. And then there are also kind of exercises that we do when our kids are going through anxiety, when they're just beginning to, we help them identify their own physical responses to anxiety, like heartbeats, or I'm starting to feel my own heartbeat, I'm starting to get nervous. And then we teach them exercises to help control that, like breathing and counting, like going to a peaceful place and playing music, like doing some other activity that is much more comforting. So there's just a little bit of different techniques to deal with anxiety.
There we go. Bonnie wants to know, my 7-year-old son clenches his jaw like an underbite. He does this like it is him stimming. I keep telling him to close his mouth correctly, and he does it, but how to make him aware, because his lips are getting dry, and I imagine that this can cause pain in his jaw.
Yeah. So it's going to be a little bit difficult, and I don't want to ignore that there might be some other type of biological, physical issue there. So I would actually try to meet with his doctor, his pediatrician, first of all, and make sure that there's nothing else going on there. Sometimes our kids have slight tics that involve like pressing their jaw. Sometimes this nerve, which is called the trigeminal nerve, when they have too much stress or anxiety, as we were talking about, they will clench this because the pressure here makes them, it just becomes a habit of pressing this and making sure that it's tensed. So those are things that you should really identify if there's something else going on, and talk to the pediatrician and make sure that if there's a medication or something that you need there to help with that, you've taken care of that. That aside, behaviorally, we would probably, as always, identify the function. It's very possible that the function is automatic in this case, but you should identify the function. So in other words, when does it happen? What are the antecedents to it happening? Does it happen like when you ask him a question and he doesn't want to respond to it? So that would be sort of an escape maintained behavior. Does it happen just when he's on his own, which is like a tic, which is much more automatic in nature? Identify the function. When you identify the function, it always helps you figure out what to do next. If it is an automatic function and it is a stimulation that he's feeling in his jaw that he enjoys, you're going to have to replace that. And what can you replace it with? I can tell you that we have done studies where we've replaced this type of behavior with gum chewing. So what you do is you essentially would give the child, you teach him how to chew gum. And because during that time, he's moving his jaw and putting enough pressure on his jaw that if he doesn't have gum, the duration of time when he has the gum, he's doing it. That's fine, and it's appropriate because he's chewing gum. But when he spits out the gum, then you don't allow it to happen. So you essentially correlate the two activities. So when he's chewing, he's able to do it. When he's not, he's calm. And those are some, and by the way, if you look online, if you do identify that it's kind of more a tic and he's aware of it, but it's very hard for him to control it, then there's a lot of different types of exercises for individuals who want to get control over these kind of muscular tics, and they can, and just focusing on it for durations of time. So you will, for instance, tell him we're going to count to 5 and you can't do it. So we'll count to 5. That'll be his baseline. And then next time you will have him keep his jaw calm up to 6, up to 10, up to 20. And then you set a timer and you gradually start to increase that. And when he feels that he can no longer keep his jaw calm is when he asks for gum. And now he gets a typical way of being able to exercise his jaw. Hopefully that makes sense. You're on mute.
I said thank you. I said very, very cool. Christina would like to know, how can I deal with when my son is in his head, to bring him back to interact with us? Telehealth is difficult sometimes regaining his attention. Any suggestions?
Yeah, it's very hard. You're right. Those are the types of things that make it harder with telehealth. Absolutely. You know, everything we do increases with reinforcer, right? So what I would do is I would just start with a very basic exercise of when I call your name, you need to stop what you're doing, look at me and attend, answer my question or do whatever I'm asking, and I will now reward you. And that is your goal. So make sure that you start with a very, very basic request, which is, I'm going to call your name. So, Shannon, and all I want from Shannon is to look at me. And I'm going to reward that with a highly rewarding stimulus. Maybe I will give Shannon a M&M or a cookie or something that she wants just for stopping what she's doing and looking at me. Then a week from now, I will add to that. And I will basically, sorry, I got distracted with the background noise. But, and then I will basically start to increase what I require. So I will now ask Shannon to stop, look at me, and also say, yes, mom, or whatever it is. And then I will give the reward. And so you bring it back down to the basic core of what you want, and then you gradually work your way back to the natural environment, which is, ultimately your goal is that when you ask your child to respond, they stop whatever they're doing and they look at you and they respond, and then they go back to what they were doing. But what you need to do is start with the very core, easy kind of antecedent behavior consequence model, reward that, and then grow it back again.
Wonderful. And that is the key to everything, that reward, right? I love it. So Parker wants to know, what is y'all's thought on, I didn't realize you were Southern, Parker, but he wrote out y'all's. What is y'all's thoughts on the COVID vaccine? There's a lot of hesitancy, including from my own parents, some due to the Wakefield paper, some due to other things. Do you all recommend it?
Well, it is definitely too soon, Parker. So the COVID vaccine has absolutely nothing at all to do with prior papers or vaccines. Nothing at all. In fact, this vaccine, we have never built anything that even slightly resembles how this vaccine works. It's the very first time that we've ever produced an mRNA vaccine. And this is kind of important because prior vaccines, like you referred to Wakefield, whose paper was on the MMR, and he was very particularly involved with the measles vaccine. But and prior other vaccines like the DTaP or even polio or any of these types of vaccines all have to do with giving the body a very, very small amount of the disease so that the body reacts to it and then builds antibodies towards that disease. So when we're talking about mumps, you are getting a tiny amount of mumps actually when you're given the MMR vaccine, and mumps, measles, and rubella all together, and your body then builds antibodies. You react to it, right? And then your body, because it's such a tiny bit, your body conquers that. That is, historically has been very, very difficult for a lot of people in the world of autism, because there are a lot of individuals, and there's quite a little bit of evidence actually, that the vaccines did cause injury to some individuals, right? If that didn't exist, we wouldn't have all of these families who are getting actually money for the damage that was made to their children. So I actually believe that there are some children who did get injured with one vaccine or another simply because their immune system was not able to fight the vaccine in a way that it produced antibodies and was therefore successful at fighting. In fact, their immune system was injured by it. So that is the past. This is a different type of vaccine. We know nothing about what this vaccine does. This vaccine is an mRNA vaccine. That means you're not getting a small amount of the COVID virus, of the coronavirus at all. What you're getting is a messenger RNA, which goes into your genetic structure and modifies your genetic structure so that you start producing antibodies. It is not a reaction to an external piece of the virus. It is a message. It's a message to your body saying, can you please produce some antibodies to this particular virus? So we don't know how this vaccine will affect us long term. Anyone, even people with a very, very healthy immune system. We don't know how it will affect us genetically. We know nothing about it. It was just produced, right? So, but please don't let it. It definitely is in a different ball game than the past vaccines. That's important to understand because the way that it works is very different. Will this current way that it works have a positive or negative effect long term? We just don't know. The question to balance it with, I think, for parents is, this is an unknown. We don't know if the vaccine, what it will do in the long term. It's unknown. What we do know is that in the short term, it prevents, at a very high percentage, your likelihood of catching this particular coronavirus, right? So COVID-19, you will at least be safe from that. So what are the harms of COVID-19? And we don't know everything there is to know there either, but we are 1 year ahead at least, right? People started catching this in the beginning of 2020. And 1 year ahead, what the literature shows so far is that different populations will get over it at different lengths. We don't know exactly. We know that the more ill you are when you get it, the higher risk of not overcoming it. One of the things that we don't know is what are the long-term issues if you've overcome COVID? And there's a lot of literature on this developing now. It just hasn't been long enough. But there is a little bit of research showing that there might be some long-term deficits or things that we have to overcome. Mental deficits, like it does impact memory, it does impact some of the kind of the speed of set shifting in your brain, those types of things. But those are things that potentially could also improve with time. We just don't know. So it's this over, it's two unknowns right now. And I think a lot of people are choosing one or the other. It's kind of like, well, I guess I'll risk it. And I'm also willing to stay at home and protect myself as much as I can. I'd prefer to do this. And others are saying, I'm losing my mind. I'm depressed. My family's depressed. I got to get out there. I have a relatively decent immune system. I'm going to go out there and do it because I need to go back to life. And so these are personal choices that everybody has to make. And it's very hard because there's no real literature there enough. It's a very new thing we're dealing with.
Yes, and I'm very fond of reminding everybody that, we should all be educating ourselves. And it's so wonderful to hear an expert like Dr. Grant-Pichet talk about it. But at this moment in time, on February 3rd in 2021, there is no vaccine that the FDA has approved for children. So, so we're still in a holding pattern waiting to hear if, now I realize that, people are looking at it, the parents, and we have adults, both on and off the spectrum, who are asking this question. But I like to keep pointing that out. I also want to point out, because so that we don't get mail that, even with all the things that you said, I don't want to speak for you, but I certainly don't consider myself anti-vaccine. I think people, when you have questions, people love to go, boom, you're anti-vaccine. And I think that we have to move away from that kind of black and white thinking. I think everyone is entitled to have questions, and it doesn't mean that you are anti.
Right.
vaccine. Vaccines are very important, and I am thrilled that they're working so hard on the vaccines, and there are a number of vaccines, and they are not all equal and even. They do different things, and our 1-shot, 2-shot, and the AstraZeneca one is vastly different, but we don't have that in the United States yet. It is on the old model. I didn't realize this until the other night. When I was doing research, the AstraZeneca is on the old model of vaccines that you were talking about. But they only have that in Europe right now. It's not approved here in the United States until potentially April. So it's interesting. But just to be clear, we're not anti-vaccine. We're smart people asking smart questions. And I'm only speaking for myself. But anyway, I want to get to our next question here. Actually, I'm so bad. I need to get to this question. I can't believe I didn't get to this before. Hello, ladies. I would like to ask for help with my son, who just a few weeks ago started having intense behaviors, which include doing rituals like tapping on things, going back to step on the floor, running towards the door of the house, running to the kitchen wall. He's also crying out of nowhere, screaming, asking for help, saying things like, "Don't take me," and "I don't want to die." When my husband or myself try to stop him from doing some of the rituals, he becomes aggressive towards us or himself. I'm not sure where all this behavior came from, but it all started around Christmas time. Prior to the behavior starting, he had a dental procedure to remove 2 baby teeth that were not coming out on their own, and adult teeth were already coming in. The experience was traumatic. I lost my place. They had to strap him down because he was trying to hit. He had never had a procedure like that done before. The whole time, from start to finish, he cried, screamed, and asked for help. It was the most traumatizing day, I swear. I feel like all these behaviors started the day after the dentist. He has never had such rigid behaviors before. He seems scared and super anxious. It almost looks like he has panic attacks a few times a day. I asked him the other day, after he had somewhat calmed down, why he was squeezing his head. And he replied that he heard a chin-chin type of sound and that he wanted to touch his brain. He also added that he couldn't put his body back together and that there were a lot of sick people dying. Please help me. This is a really terrible seeing him. He looks like he's so lost and almost like he can't control his body or his brain. Please, I don't know how to help him, and I don't know how much longer I can see him like this. Thank you so much. And she did leave her phone number. So, yeah.
So this is, when you first started describing some of the things that he's doing, like running back and forth and so on, I started writing down for myself anxiety behaviors. And this is more than just normal anxiety. This is trauma. So he experienced trauma, as you mentioned. And what he's experiencing now is PTSD, which stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. Very clear. You described PTSD completely. I mean, exactly. And, different people have different, levels that they can tolerate, tolerance levels, right? And someone might go to war in Vietnam and come back and not have PTSD, and someone else might develop PTSD from having a dental procedure, especially when it's a child who doesn't quite understand what is going on, and it's a painful, and maybe they can't express that, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter, and please don't blame yourself for that. You did what was right, and you had to get him through this, because we all know that dental pain in the long run is also very, very traumatic. So what you did was fine. Where we are now is PTSD, and we have to deal with it. And with PTSD, the problem is that it is so severe that oftentimes, initially, behavioral stuff doesn't work all that well, because the individual is just traumatized, right? And they're not open to receiving. So it's kind of like if I was to tell you, try to reward him more. It might work and it might not, because at this point he is so traumatized that he's just doing all of these things. And by the way, anxiety behavior, stuff that we do post-trauma, is all protective. It doesn't make any sense. It's not logical, but it's what our body and our brain does in order to protect itself. So like people who have obsessive compulsive disorder, for instance, they wash their hands, as an example, 50 times. It's not logical because you just washed your hands a minute ago, right? But it is the process of what goes on in the brain. The compulsion is calming. And so with your child running back and forth, that compulsion is calming. These types of illogical, repetitive behaviors allow the individual to feel like they have control over the situation. And by doing this thing, they're getting control over it. They're going to be okay. They're going to be safe. And so that's the psychology of it. Just to understand that it's pretty hard for you to see these things, but that's what it is even if he's hurting himself or hitting or scratching or whatever it is, it's I want to get control over whatever this feeling is. And this is one way that I can get control over it. Okay, so what do? We basically go back and you will start with getting medication. And once you get medication that will help him calm down, and again, we're talking about anxiety medication. And this does take a couple of weeks, but it's relative. You could even get, your pediatrician might actually even be willing to give you a panic type medication. So these are medications that are usually not used a lot with children, but in trauma situations they are. And what they do is they give you, it calms you almost within 15 minutes, right? It's not intense, but it calms you in very quickly so that you're not panicking. Now, it might also make the child a little bit tired, let's say. But regardless, once you have calmed the child, then that's where you do a lot of the activities. Like, for instance, you will take a look and see, let me ask you as a parent, can you segment his day and observe when these behaviors are happening more? Are they happening equally across the entire day? In which case, we will now need to put in a lot more calming and rewarding activities throughout his day. Or are these behaviors happening at certain times of the day? Perhaps when he thinks you're about to take him out. Perhaps it's when he thinks that you are, I don't know, it's the afternoon and he's tired. Maybe he's not sleeping. Like, when are these behaviors occurring more? And what you do is you essentially start to completely alter his entire day. So you'll start with we're going to have Disneyland every day. We're going to do only things that are super, super, super fun and positive for him. Things that during which he would never hit his head or do any of these other things. We're going to have fun. So now we're having an absolutely fun day. That's good. But how long can I keep this up? Don't worry about it. You'll keep it up and you'll gradually change it back to normal. But the bottom line is he went through trauma. So right now you have to make everything turn positive again before you can gradually go back to just normal routine. So, behaviorally, that's the way to go. You start with a fully reward-enriched schedule, and you gradually reintroduce demands, very gradually, so that he can handle it. That's the behavioral. In terms of the medical, aside from looking at things that would help anxiety, you also want to, by the way, track his sleep, because his sleep might have been altered, and if your sleep is reduced, then you're going to have more anxiety during the day as well. So these are some pointers, but trauma is a very odd thing, and getting over it takes a little bit of time.
And she has written in and said that she spoke with his pediatrician and they said they couldn't prescribe anything for him, and that she did start writing down in a notebook since January 3rd, and the behaviors are happening at different times and places. My question for you, Dr. Granpeesheh, is that I've heard you talk about EFT tapping for anxiety and trauma before, but I don't know I don't know how old this child is, and I don't know if that's something. I've actually looked into having an EFT tapping person come and talk with us on the show about what this would be like for kids on the spectrum, but I don't know at what age, and I don't know if this is a fair question for you, if you know, but at what age can that be effective for a child with trauma?
Yeah, it's hard, Shannon. Tapping exercises are very useful and have been shown, eye movement desensitization has been shown to be very effective for, let's say, war veterans who come back with trauma. But I've done this. I've not only studied it, but I've also done it. And I don't see it working with our kids that much because it's first of all, you have to memorize a series of locations, and it's very self-induced. It's not something that someone else can do for you, but you need what it involves. It's similar to desensitization that we do for phobias or those types of things. But with systematic desensitization processes, you basically are pairing a phobic type of stimulus or gradual graduations, I guess, to that stimulus. So like a picture of the stimulus and experience, etc., to a calming experience. You pair them. So you're pairing things like relaxation and breathing to stimuli that are progressively more and more scary. Okay? And that way you kind of get over the phobic element. With tapping, you're pairing the tapping to the mental activity of the trauma. So it would involve you being able to tell the child, I want you to remember the dental experience and bring it back up while you do tapping. And from what I'm reading, I don't see that is something that the child would be capable of. Maybe they are, and in which case we would be happy to help you learn more about tapping. I do think that it seems very overwhelming because it's sudden, extreme, and it appears to be all day or at different times of the day. And I would say separate the day so that you are not dealing with 24 hours of just chaos. You're dealing with maybe 5 incidents, and then you're dealing with each one. Okay, so don't let it overwhelm you. Just separate the day, figure out what are the antecedents to each episode, and then we can work with you to try to figure out how do we modify the antecedents and the consequences of each episode so that it won't happen as much, or so that the child finds ways to calm themselves.
Okay. Hey, we've got some folks who are watching us today on Vaughn Live for the first time, so we want to say hello to them. And one of them has written in and said, I wish I knew how to handle my brother. Even after many years, I still don't know how to deal with to prevent his anger bursts. He is now in his 60s and still unpredictable, has a very short fuse.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if the brother has a diagnosis of any kind. I guess it doesn't really matter, to be honest with you, because, the basis of it is behaviors that are rewarded increase and maintain. They continue. And if we want a behavior to stay, we pay attention to it, we give into it, we allow it to be effective. And if we want a behavior to be eliminated, to discontinue, then we have to make sure that it is not getting attention, that it is not getting what the individual wanted by doing the behavior. And that is the most important thing. And when you look at someone who's 60, my initial reaction is to think that by losing his temper, he has managed to get what he wants in the world. So whenever he lost his temper, people gave in and they gave him what he wanted. So from his perspective, he learned this is a very effective mode of communicating with the world. And it's very hard when someone is 60 because not only is this behavior ingrained, but it is also, and when a behavior has become a habit like that for so many years, it's harder to change. But it is also very difficult because there's many people interacting with this individual. And even if you were to change and not give in, others might still be afraid and give in. So I think it starts by getting together with all the people who are as frustrated as you are. I guess all the people who are in his life who are experiencing the same level of frustration and saying, hey, this type of tantruming has to end. We can't tolerate this anymore. And then you all kind of get together and you sit down and all say, yes, first of all, we want this to change. And then what you do is you do a functional behavior assessment and you say, well, it looks like he tantrums or has these negative behaviors under these conditions. Like whenever we ask him to do something, whenever he doesn't want to do something, whenever he wants access to something. It's always going to be one of those things, right? He wants access to something. He wants to avoid something. He wants attention. So those are very basic things. And you list the function. You list, okay, like it's maybe one of these, or it's all of these, or most of the time it's because he wants to avoid something, let's say. And then what you have to do is everyone has to agree that you're not going to let that communication be effective anymore. So when he tantrums, he will not get to what he wants anymore. It's just that simple. When he tantrums or is aggressive or whatever it is, we're just going to ignore it. He's not going to get his way anymore. Instead, we're going to give him a different out. We're going to say, hey, if you don't want to do this activity, all you have to do is just say, I don't want to really do this right now. Vocalize it. Or all you have to, if he's non-vocal, I don't know, then all you have to do is maybe give us a sign and just a symbol that shows that he wants time out. Something like that. A more appropriate way of communicating. And that's what it's all about. And that's what ABA is all about, really. But it's not an easy task. And when you're trying to change the behavior of someone older, I would really recommend that you get together with an expert in ABA, which would be a board certified behavior analyst, and you get them to help you identify the function, to help you write out a kind of treatment plan that the entire family can do together.
Okay, I think we have time to squeeze in one last little question. Just May says, is it normal for schools to not want to be on board with your child's ABA program? I thought ABA was generalized. They want to do their own thing, and I want ABA to be a part of his IEP.
Yeah, I don't know what normal is anymore. It's school to school. Some schools are very pro ABA. In fact, they are just like getting better and better. Other schools still don't have any understanding of what ABA even is. Forget about being on board with it. I commend you. I think you are right, and it is your right, and it is your child's right to have access to ABA. And I think that you need to call for an IEP and say, I'm sorry, but ABA is the single intervention that has shown to be hugely effective, which is why it's the single intervention that is funded. And I need you guys to provide it to me. And you know what? I'll tell you the truth. If they don't provide it to you, it's even better, because then you will have the opportunity to have an arrangement where the school has to pay for an ABA expert to provide it to you. Sometimes schools will say, oh, I have an ABA program, and it's not an ABA program at all. So, one step at a time. First, call an IEP and say, I really want ABA in my child's program, and then see what they offer you and come back and we can talk about it.
And just briefly, I just want you to know that my son was in a school for a while who said, oh, in an IEP, you can't dictate the method. You can only dictate what the goals are. You can't dictate the method to us. And they would say, we don't do ABA. And so what we did was we outfoxed them. And with the help of CARD, with the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, we stopped using the word ABA and stopped asking for ABA, but we started writing ABA into all of his behavior intervention plans. And saying that this is how they had to deal with behavior. So they ended up doing ABA. We just didn't say it was ABA.
Could you ask Bonnie? I wonder if things have changed now, like that, because ABA is kind of, not only approved by the Surgeon General, but funded, publicly funded through insurance. I wonder if you can request it now, because so much time has passed and we've now concluded that this is the most effective form of
education. I'll ask Bonnie. We have Bonnie back on Monday, and I'll make that the first question that we will ask her. And everybody's saying thank you so much for all your help. We want to thank Dr. Grampy-Shea for being with us and giving this time. And we just so appreciate your beautiful mind and that you share what you know with us. It's so amazing. And I want to thank all of you for being here and reminding you that if you like, and we have a video that will play now, but like us, share us, tell other people about it. We're so glad that we're on more platforms now. We're back tomorrow with an amazing young mom who is a social worker and who has a very interesting story to tell about what she's been doing in COVID and how it's been changing her life. And I think you're all going to love this tomorrow. Very uplifting story. And then on Friday, Nancy and I are back with licensed marriage and family therapist Vince Redman, who's going to be here. So excited that we're able to provide you guys that programming. We're going to be live the rest of the week. Thank you again, Dr. Grampy-Shea. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching Autism Live. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
I'm muted. Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and I am here with the lovely, fabulous, and brilliantly intelligent Dr. Doreen Grampy-Shea. This is a segment that we do on Wednesday mornings called Ask Dr. Doreen. It's my favorite time of the week. So thrilled to be here with her. And in just a second, she is going to start answering questions that you guys write in. But first, let's talk about a couple of things. We're live right now. I always have to check the date. It is the 10th of February. And I'm getting some feedback here, so I'm going to lower my speakers a little bit. But we're excited to be here with you live. I'm wearing red because it's Valentine's Day week. So we're excited to be here, and we are on many more platforms than we've ever been before. So we are live right now on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope. Those are the big four, but we are also live on many more sites today. Every day we're adding more sites because Traven, our producer, is fabulous. So in whatever format that you're writing in, go ahead and write in that format, and it pops up here on our screen. It takes a little bit longer for some of the new ones. For those of you watching on Vaughn Live, it takes a little bit longer, but be persistent. We can tell you with all honesty and humbly tell you that we won't be able to answer all the questions, but we really do appreciate when you write in. We try to get through as many as we can. And if you're persistent, I do notice that. I also want to tell you that we podcast the live show, so you can catch up on old episodes. Even yesterday's episode, you can go to our YouTube channel or our homepage, autism-live.com, and catch up on old episodes. But we also do highlights on our YouTube channel. If you just want to catch a single interview with someone, you can check that out on our highlights on our homepage or on our YouTube channel. And then we podcast the live show to every place that has a free download of podcasts. So wherever you get your podcasts, check us out there. We are a free download. I'm very happy and proud to say that we've been doing that for quite a while. This will be our 10th year, which is pretty insane and lovely. But right now, those of you who are watching can write in and get your questions answered by Dr. Doreen Marathon. She's a true expert in the field of autism. I say the premier expert in the field of autism in our time. And there is no time like the present for autism. We know more right now than we've known forever. And Dr. Marathon has been at the forefront. I always say she's a visionary because I believe that she can see around corners. She sees things coming before they're there for individuals on the spectrum, but also the people who love and care about them. And so I'm deeply appreciative that we have her here. She's the founder of the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, also the founder of a wonderful charity, Autism Care Today. So Dr. Marathon, thank you for being with us again today.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Shannon. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I want to apologize to our viewers, first of all, for the mess in my background over here. That's because I'm packing up this office, and so there's a lot of boxes everywhere. So forgive me, everyone, and hopefully you can ignore the background today.
They say that swearing and having not everything ticky neat is a sign of intelligence. So feel free to swear, and we excuse your mess because we love your brilliant brain. We are saying hi to Humera. Hello and welcome. Good vibes. Yes, many good vibes. I wanted to start today, Dr. Marathon, with a follow-up to a question that you had answered last week. We had a viewer who wrote in very concerned because her child had been through a traumatic experience at a dentist's office and was exhibiting some pretty intense signs of anxiety. And you had given some suggestions about seeking out professional help last week, but also about things that you can be doing at home while you're getting the professional help about making their day more fun. I just want to say that she wrote back, again, this is a 10-year-old on the autism spectrum, traumatic experience at the dentist, who's having panic attacks, super high anxiety, and as she says, some self-harm. She says, Dr. Doreen answered my question last week, and she told us this time that he's on a medicine, guanfacine, 1 milligram at night. She says, I really haven't seen any difference in his anxiety or panic attacks. They're still happening. He's still harming himself. And she goes on to say, you also said to make his day very fun and positive. I've been trying very hard to make his day very fun, but I just can't do it all day long. I have 2 other kids to attend to, and I'm the only one with him during the day as my husband has 2 jobs. So, but still having a high amount of anxiety. Is there any follow-up that you want to give her at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's making his day fun is a good thing, but it isn't going to be the answer on its own. I really think, especially because he's exhibiting self-harm, I really do think that you need professional help, and it would be important to get together with. You can start with, if you have contact with a behavior analyst, they might be able to help you at this point by placing staff in your home so that he is not alone and not allowed to self-harm. But at the same time, I really feel like he has experienced trauma. And so it would be important to get together with a psychologist. And that would have to be someone who kind of understands the autism world, and understands how our kids can experience things more harshly than anyone else. Because, what happens in their environment is often much more intrusive for them. Let's put it that way. So, and guanfacine can help. It's probably not sufficient. He's 10 years old. There are many other medications and higher doses of guanfacine as well, that could help calm him. And, you got to be careful with self-harm, because while you're trying to make his day positive, which is the right thing to do, and to reduce demands, accidentally, you could also be rewarding his self-harm. And that's a very important distinction. We don't want to, reduce demands or give rewards right after self-harm occurs, because that will definitely increase the self-harm. So from the child's perspective, it'll be kind of oh, well, this worked. Every time I do something that scares people, they let me just do what I want to do. And that's not what we want. So I think it's really important to just get together with a professional. My recommendation would be, at this point, for you to find a psychiatrist who can help with medication, and a behavior analyst who can set up a behavior intervention plan in your home, and who can train you and other family members to kind of deal with this situation. And if your child is high functioning enough where talking about it is possible for him, then a psychologist would also be very helpful.
Okay, wonderful. We have a question, a lengthy question that's come in from India, and I'm going to try to condense it down. Thank you so much, Sajal, for writing to us. A boy, just turned 4, diagnosed with ASD at the age of 2.5, does not have siblings. They started it with 7.5 hours a week of ABA. They were doing other things, 2 hours a day of neurotypical play with school shadow, OT 2 hours a week. He was verbal at the time of diagnosis, but it was mainly tacting, low manding, and low interverbals. Since COVID, he's getting 45 minutes of ABA a day, then 45 minutes of online class with neurotypical kids from school, and continuing with the OT. They're getting some RDI once a week, and they recently joined Skills. So they have the Skills software for 2 months. His latest evaluation says that he has ASD with no language impairment and intellectual impairment. So I don't know if that's no language impairment and no intellectual impairment, or we're saying that he does have intellectual impairment. Maybe Sajal, write us back and tell us. But it's his social skills with peers that are really a problem. He has an obsession with animals, which limits his conversation and social skills. Unless they're in a very structured activity, he perseverates on that and wants to do animal noises, pretend animal noises. And so they're wanting to know, if they get him a 20 to 24 hours a week ABA program with one-to-one therapy, would it help him with this and with his deficits? They say they try to stimulate him as much as possible. He does not, and they wrote back and said he does not have intellectual impairment. So for a child like this, would a 20 to 24 hour program, ABA program, help them?
Yes. Wonderful. So glad that you wrote all the detail. Let me just start by saying yes, absolutely. The very first point that I wrote down for myself as Shannon was reading was that the intensity of ABA he's receiving is not high enough. It is extremely low. What he was, 45 minutes a day or even 7.5 hours. So, and I like the question because it is a question that a lot of parents ask me, and we should just touch on this briefly because, as parents, we see the deficits. And so, this is a great example because this is a child who has language and he has no intellectual impairment. And so the main thing that you as a parent are concerned about is social development, right? So, and I will tell you that there are a lot of prerequisite skills that have to be in place for the social development to take place. It's not as easy as saying, hey, let's just put him with other kids and guide him a little bit and he will start to have normal social development. It's not that easy. It's not like that. There's a lot of things that are involved. For example, when you are talking about just social communication, that's one lesson in our program. What we're talking about is teaching the child to differentiate between approaching one other child as opposed to approaching a group of children. If you think about it, those behaviors are different, right? So the child has to learn both of those. And then once you've approached, let's say, a group or a single other child, how do you bring up a topic that is of interest to both of you? How do you read the facial expressions and gestures of the other children so that if they get bored, you know that it's, first of all, you understand that they are getting bored, you interpret their facial expressions correctly, and then you change the subject to something that is of interest to them. How do you take turns with them, allowing them to talk about things they're interested in? How do you listen to those things and ask appropriate questions? How do you repair the relationship if a child gets angry or walks away from boredom or whatever it is? There are, tons of little steps that have to be taught to the child one by one before a social interaction becomes appropriate. And I just used one example. I mean, if the same child now wants to enter a group of adults, his entire interaction is going to be different than entering a group of children. So these are a lot of different subtle things. And I also tell you that a lot of times our kids might have appropriate speech, but their advanced language concepts, like pragmatic language, is not really there. So what I would recommend for you is not to worry so much about just, how do I fix or keep him active or all that. Get as many hours as you can. 20 to 24 or 25 is like the bottom of what I feel is effective, but it will make a big difference for him. Get those hours, and you're on skills now, so you've answered the questions. Start at the basic stuff that he's not good at, whether it doesn't have to be in the social curriculum. It'll maybe be in language curriculum or executive functioning or cognition or those areas, and start with the youngest level lessons and just pound away and go at it in 25, 24 hours and keep doing that for a while, and you'll see that things will change and he'll start to put it together in a much more cohesive way.
Thank you for all of that. I got to tell you, Dr. Granpeesheh, this is one of the biggest like hurdles in my day, is that I sort of feel like it's like the FedEx arrow. Do people know about the FedEx arrow? When you look at the logo of FedEx, there is a hidden arrow embedded in the logo. And until you've seen it, you like can look at the FedEx logo a million times and you don't see it. But once somebody points it out to you and shows you where the hidden arrow is, you can never unsee it again. You always see it. And I see that with parents, everybody, including myself in the beginning goes, that just sounds like too many hours. Like, 24 hours a week for a child, of ABA, and we clutch our pearls and our hair. And we're like, somebody, call in the troops, because it just seems crazy. But then once you see that that's what's effective and you really get it, you can never unsee it again. And I'm always trying to get people over that hurdle to the place where they can see it. And my new thing that I was thinking about yesterday is, because I tell people about the science, I tell them about our experience, I tell them about other people, and everybody's still like, I don't know. And now my thing is, I just want to challenge everybody. You don't have to believe it. I just want you to, so that you can quiet your mind and live with no regret. I'm challenging people, just try it for 3 months.
Yeah.
Just try it for 3 months. And at the end of 3 months, if you don't feel like your child doing a really intense program has been life-changing, then call me up and tell me I'm an idiot. I guarantee you nobody's going to call me. But if you don't do it, and you have a small child and you say, I just don't know if it's going to work, and it's such a commitment. If you don't try it, I guarantee you that later on you're going to wonder, could we have had more progress?
Yeah.
And I know what that is like. I sit and hold the hands of parents who say, I think we missed the boat. Mm-hmm. And I wish we could go back in time. So you don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe the science. You don't even have to believe Dr. Granpeesheh, who can tell you how many thousands of children she has seen. All the scientists say the same thing, that intensity it's crucial. But if you won't believe all that, I challenge you. I dare you to do it 3 months. I'm not talking about a week or 3 weeks. Get 3 months. And if you don't see that it's life-changing, please, I will pie myself on camera if somebody tells me that it wasn't life-changing. I pledge and I promise. I guarantee you'll find it life-changing.
Yeah.
Am I crazy, Dr. Granpeesheh?
No, you're 100% right, Shannon. And it's I kind of understand. Whenever you tell me that, it just kind of makes sense to me. I never really thought about it, because I kind of grew up with an intensive program, right? I mean, I was at the UCLA program where every child who came in would receive 40 hours. There was no such thing as less than 40 hours. Every single program was a 40-hour program. And I wish that we had kept it that way. In fact, like the original study, just so everybody knows, showed that if you took matched children, so children in two groups, and they were matched on IQ and capabilities and all of that, and if you gave one group 40 hours a week and the other group 10 hours a week, the group that was 40 hours a week, half of those children achieved normal intelligence and were placed in regular education. And of the group that received 10 hours, only one child, so that was 2% of the group, actually achieved that. And I have to say, it's super important. Intensity is the dosage of ABA. And it's like if someone tells you take 20 milligrams of something and you decide to take 2, it's not going to work, right? So it's just that simple. And I'm really happy this family is on skills, because you now have the ability to see how many things have to be caught up. It's not just social behavior. It's a lot of stuff that goes into social behavior. And I saw that the same mom has asked how to decrease the animal obsessions. And I want to say it's also not as simple as just saying, hey, you're not allowed to obsess on animals anymore. If you have a group of people, or if you can put together, and I know you're not in the US, but if you can put together a team of people students, let's say, from high school or college, who can be trained. And of course, we've developed the training online through our other company called Institute for Behavioral Training. You can go on there and it's all video training, and these folks can learn the techniques of ABA. And if you can do that for 25 hours and you can use skills to guide you, you'll see that we don't just prevent obsessions, we redirect them to something that's a little bit more appropriate. For example, with your child who's obsessed with animals, depending on the age of the child, there might be certain activities that are okay that have to do with animals. Let's say if it's a young child, it could be, coloring animals or doing paint by number with animals. If it's an older child, it could be reading about animals. It could be a variety of things. In fact, over the course of time, you just want to kind of redirect this into an appropriate avenue. Maybe this child will be someone who will become a groomer of animals, a caretaker of animals, or something that is going to also give the child, joy in his occupation in the future. But my point, and then what you do is you restrict it so that the child is only engaging in that thing that he's obsessed with at a narrow period of time as opposed to the entire day. So these are not things that I really recommend parents try to do on their own. I truly think that it would be important for you to connect with a behavior analyst, a BCBA, and someone who has a little bit of experience. And of course, even if you're international, there's a lot of companies that will give you guidance through a BCBA on Zoom and will help you to kind of monitor things and set these programs into place. But you do need to get the child into a more intensive, and even 20, 24 hours, honestly, is not intensive. It's kind of a medium level program, but if your child is high functioning and has some speech and no intellectual disability, then it might be the appropriate number to start with.
Okay, we got a lot of things we got to address here. First of all, Amanda, who always has my back, wrote it and said, make sure when I'm telling people to do ABA to mention the hallmark, which is you've got to do quality ABA. And yes, Amanda, you're absolutely right. It has to be quality ABA. And we talk a lot on this show about how to differentiate quality ABA from some of the things that are out there. But a lot of people are writing in now, Dr. Granpeesheh, with questions about skills and how to access ABA and the tools that you're talking about outside of the country. So do you want me to pause for a second and tell them this week's messages from Skills, or do you want to talk about what Skills and IBT are really quickly?
Sure. I mean, I'll introduce what they are, and then please feel free to give them more information. So many years ago, when my company CARD, Center for Autism, was growing and the need for autism was increasing, and I felt I couldn't keep up with, especially international need. We were getting a lot of requests from India and other places. I see a lot of families who are viewing today from India, but I decided that somehow I had to get all of the knowledge that we had out internationally. So we built a platform online, and this was called Skills. And Skills begins with an assessment. So when you get on Skills, and now it's its own company essentially, and you go on there as a parent, and you sign up, and you answer a lot of questions about your child. And the questions are, can your child do something? And you say yes or no. And when I say a lot, bear with us, because there really are a lot of questions. And it's important that you do that, because no two children are the same. And children have different strengths and weaknesses and areas of need. And Skills, after you answer all these questions, it kind of develops a profile of your child and identifies all the different areas that your child needs help with. And these are in language, social skills, play, cognitive skills, executive function, academic, adaptive, motor skills. And those are the 8 areas of functioning. And you will basically not only get an age level. So my child is 5 years old, but his language is at a 3-year level or that sort of thing. But you will also get, what's very, very important is sort of a list of lessons that need to be taught in order to catch the child up to their own age, right? So if my child is 5 and he's functioning more like a 2-year-old, then I have all these lessons in between 2 and 5 that I need to teach. So skills will link you, the assessment answers will then link you to everything that you said your child cannot do. And each of those things then is written in a very, very comprehensive lesson format in ABA and of what you need to teach. Now, there's many other aspects to skills as well. It has a whole data tracking process, and it also has a section which is called the Behavior Intervention Planner, which will give you a plan for how to deal with challenging behaviors along the way. It has a lot of functions that will be very helpful to you, but that's the curriculum, the program, the assessment. You can reassess. It will automatically, as your child masters certain things, it'll change the assessment and show you that the child is mastering more things. It'll show you also, it'll give you new lessons as your child ages, all of those types of things. But after we developed this, I realized, okay, so the parents now will have access to the content, the curriculum, the lessons, but how do I teach them ABA and the techniques? So then we developed another program called Institutes for Behavioral Training, which is really an offshoot from CARD's training department. And it became its own company. And it is hundreds and hundreds of hours of online training for parents, for professionals, and for paraprofessionals, teachers, etc. And those are, we keep improving those, to be honest with you. Every single year we've modified, and they're very, very good videos that you can see and learn from. So with those together, I feel like you have the tools. You can learn the techniques and you can do an assessment for your child and then actually get a program going, not just for yourself, but for whoever is going to help you treat your child.
Thank you because those wonderful description of both of those things. But just to clarify, you can use these, they're online, you can use them anywhere in the world, because so many of you are writing in and saying, I'm in the UK, how would I start this? We have somebody writing in from the United Arab Emirates. So these are tools that you can use from anywhere and that you can start today. I want you to get your pens out because I'm going to give you a phone number and an email. And I'm going to tell you about stuff that's available to you for free today. So each week, Skills and IBT sends me an email and says, here's what we're giving to the world this week for free because of the pandemic. So this week, they're offering to parents and guardians a free IBT parent e-learning course. The title of it is Parent Tackling Autism as a Family. For the educator community, if we have teachers that are out there watching, or if you're a caregiver and you want to share this information with your child's teacher because it's free, they have an IBT educator e-learning module. It's Educator Useful Strategies, and that's available to teachers this week at no charge. They are also continuing at Skills and IBT to offer the RBT 2.0 course. That is for the registered behavior technician. It is the online learning portion of that. So it's the first step to becoming a registered behavior technician. It also is the first step to becoming a board certified autism technician. And that is normally like a $440 class that you take that's paced by you, that you take online. But they are offering that during the pandemic to caregivers on a case-by-case basis. It's about a 40-hour class. And if you want to do that, you need to reach out to them directly. Also, if you're interested in Skills or any of Skills products, they're offering that to you at a 10% discount. You do need to call them, or I will, if you're international, I'll give you my email. You can email me and I will forward it to them. So the phone number is 877-975-4559. Again, for any of the free things or discount that I was talking about, you do need to call 877-975-4559. And if you are international, as so many of you are today, you can email me and I will forward your email. It's s.penrod@autism-live.com. And I think Traven's going to put that up on the screen. But for those of you who are listening in podcast in the future, S as in Shannon, .Penrod, which is P as in Peter, E as in egg, N as in Nancy, R as in robot, O as in Oscar, D as in dog, at autism. I love that I don't have to spell that for any of you. You all know how to spell that. So autism and then hyphen, that's the dash in the middle, live, L-I-V as in Victor, E.com. So write to me if you're international and I will forward your email over to the Skills folks. It's a great tool, an amazing tool. And it answers a lot of the questions that some of you have been writing in about what can I do. I will tell you that I remember the day that I met Dr. Doreen Grampiche because it was the day that she was unveiling Skills to some people in the autism community. And what I heard her say on that day made me shake. I'm going to cry. I shook for hours because I was so excited. Because she said, and I already knew it, my child had had the benefit of that curriculum that is in Skills. And she said, we have the answers. We need to share it with the world. And everyone can't be here. We need to share it with the world. And all of that is what's packed into Skills and IBT. And, your legacy is so large, Dr. Grampiche, but I will never forget you saying that. Not ever. I think it was one of the most pivotal moments in my life. And I think I've told you before, I left the building, drove about 2 doors down and had to pull into the parking lot because I couldn't drive. And I called my husband and I said, I've seen the future and I would follow that woman into a burning building because I would know she was going in for a good reason. So anyway, I get emotional. But part of why I'm emotional is because a mom has written in, and her story is mine, but she didn't have the benefit of what I had. And so my heart is bleeding for her. She says, good day to you. Oh, my computer just timed out. Good day to you. My son was born with an APGAR score of 910. He was a normal child until 3 years old. All of a sudden, he has developed unusual behaviors like not sleeping, no appetite, hyperactive. All at the same time, slowly, he started to lose his speech. We were clueless. Later, he was diagnosed with autism with borderline, but within a year, he became acutely affected. That period, we put him in ABA 2.5 hours a week, an OT 2.5 hours a week for 3 years. He has developed a few behaviors in terms of OT, but his language skills, which we had up until 3 years, has been totally lost. At present, he is 9. He is nonverbal. Also with the pandemic, he could not get therapy for the past 9 months. How can parents intervene and develop the skills at home?
Yeah. So first, Shannon, can you hear me okay? Because I was getting some. You're okay. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay, great. So it breaks my heart to hear that, but let's do everything we can right now. Whenever I hear that a child has lost skills, I always think that some form of environmental factor caused that, because when you have a loss of skills, it's sort of a sudden event type thing. And you have to kind of look back. And a lot of times when that is occurring around age 3 or so, it's some form of overload And this is one of the reasons that a lot of parents believe that their child was injured by vaccines, as an example, because there's overload happening in the child's. A lot of our kids are very sensitive, and they're not detoxifying as fast as everyone else. And so basically what happens is whether it's a vaccine or some other type of environmental factor, their immune system is affected and they are not able to detoxify as rapidly as they need to from environmental toxins. And then they lose skills. And then unfortunately, if we can't identify what is the factor that is causing toxicity, then over a course of time, the child doesn't redevelop those skills, and then it becomes very difficult as they age to redevelop those skills. But at this point, and I very much appreciate that you are not giving up and that you are, still trying at the age of 9. And what I would do is I would at this point, I would ask you to, envision a new set of goals. These are not going to be the same goals that you might have envisioned at age 3, but they're going to be goals that are very important for him and that will help him and that he will be able to accomplish. So what becomes very important is for him to be able to communicate. He's nonverbal, so let's not worry about whether or not he communicates verbally. Let's just worry about making sure he can communicate. Because it's important, and I always tell this to parents who have older kids who are still not communicating, that I cannot even imagine how sweet those children are, how kind and patient and lovely they are if they're not getting aggressive. Because I can tell you that if I was not able to communicate, I would probably get pretty frustrated and pretty angry. So, and maybe your child is a little bit frustrated, but either way, we do need to figure out ways that will work for him that he can communicate. And what we usually do, every child is a little bit different, but what we usually do is we will begin with iconic or picture type of communication. So picture exchange communication system, PECS, is very, very effective if it is used correctly and used consistently. Basically, PECS is a program where there are little figures, icons for everything that you would want to communicate or request. And you start with a very, very basic, it has levels. So it starts with a very, very basic level of just handing a picture to you when he wants something. So it's a representation of the item he wants. And then it becomes more longer sentences like I want as opposed to it is. And it's an expansion on communication, but it is all nonverbal. There are children who are able and interested in learning letters and keyboarding. And if they have any interest, or even children who have a good visual memory, we will next go to communicating via typing. So, and that is a very, very big step because PECS is fantastic, and you can have a PECS board where the child will pull off an icon and give it to you. You can have a PECS book that even goes with the child wherever they go, but it is still a little bit more difficult than actually being able to type. Because if you are able to write what you want and what you see and how you feel and describe things that are going on and all that sort of stuff, you can now, obviously, you'll learn on a keyboard, then you'll transfer to an iPad. You can go to an augmentative device that will actually say what you typed, or you could just use your phone and type things in. One of my kids, became so he's completely nonverbal still, but became so expressive using his phone that he would nonstop basically tell everyone what to do. No, I don't want to go there. I want to go to Toys R Us right now. And he would type this so rapidly, and his parent, he would not stop communicating. It was just that he couldn't vocalize it. So bottom line is there are lots of choices in terms of how to communicate. It does not have to be verbal. In fact, a lot of parents choose to go to sign language. That might be a way as well. Sign is a little bit harder than these visual systems that I mentioned, but any and all of these are fantastic because the child needs to be able to communicate. And if I were you at age 9, I would really be focusing on that. Now, you can also, if you still feel that your child has verbal or vocal sounds that they're making, you can also pair vocalizations with the iconic language or communication. So I give you a picture of juice, and I also say juice when I want it, as an example. But these are things that are very subtle decisions that have to be made. And, my recommendation really is in where you are, you might be able to easily find folks who are experts in augmentative devices and communicating using an augmentative device. Or you might be able to have access to a BCBA. And there, all over the world, there are now BCBAs. And the way that you find them is that you go on the Behavior Analysis Certification Board website. You just put that in. Behavior Analysis Certification Board. Google that. It's the BACB.org, right? And it will pop up. And on there, you will see that there's a way to look for find certificates, it says. And then you'll go in and you will put in your country, your state, wherever you are, and it'll list all the folks who are a board certified behavior analyst, BCBA, in your area. And it has their information. And you shoot those people an email and you say, I really need your help. I want to set up an ABA program, or I need advice for my child, and just the kind of stuff you just wrote to me. And hopefully you'll be able to get some help in terms of kind of guidance over your overall program.
And I was trying to find, because Sue Cho, who comes and talks with us sometimes on the show about teaching that augmentative and assisted language. A lot of people recommend Proloquo. Sue recommends a different program, which I believe is called Touch Chat. I was trying to find it in my texts and I can't find it. I will ask her though and let you guys know, but I believe it's called Touch Chat. But I really want to address, because mom or dad, I don't know whether it's mom or dad, wrote back in and said that he does have some vocal skills, that he can speak simple words, but rarely. And I just want to make sure, because a lot of times people feel like, well, it's this hardcore thing. If my child can speak at all, then we don't do assisted and augmentative devices. And correct me if I'm wrong, that it really kind of depends on what you've tried before and what age. But by 9, we really want to give them as much functional communication as possible. Even if they can speak some words, we're not going to harm that by giving them more communication, are we?
No, we're not at all. And I just saw a couple of more chats from this parent who, and they're saying that he does speak simple words, but rarely, and that's a good thing. That's very good news. And it just excites me more. I really encourage you to get a BCBA on board and to start working with him, because it's an easy step going from single words to sentences. It is an easy and fun process expanding his library of words. And as Shannon said, it doesn't hurt. Think of it as just a visual cue. You can continue to honor the words that he currently says. And in fact, sometimes, because our kids are much more visual, their language actually increases, their vocal language increases when they have apex or any kind of visual system paired with it, because they start to understand kind of what is happening. But the key to increasing, whether it's vocal or non-vocal communication, is to make sure that the child understands that they will get what they want when they communicate it, and they won't when they don't communicate it. So if your child, for instance, says a few words, I assume those are what we call mans. Mans are when they request something. So it's something that the child wants. And so if your child says, like, let's say water, you give water to the child when they say it. You do not when they don't say it. It sounds very difficult when you're a parent, but it isn't, because you can model and prompt the child to ask for water every time by saying water. So as I explained that, you might be able to see why it's easier to use iconic or non-vocal types of communication, because sometimes for our children, it's just very, very difficult to produce words because they have apraxia. Their tongue is not able to move as fast as ours does when we produce words. They don't know how to pair enough air exertion with sound and so on. So nonverbal or non-vocal communication can often be easier, faster, and it can still pair with the vocal, and it can actually help expedite the vocal expression as well.
There we go. We have a bunch of questions that I want to try to get to, but I want to start with, they want to know, is skills living, which we're going to have to explain what skills living is, more comprehensive than AFLS, and I don't know what AFLS is.
I also don't know what AFLS is, but skills living, so we have two versions of skills. The first version is skills developing, and that is for younger children. It starts at birth, and it goes all the way to, I believe, mental age 8. Now, it's important to consider that it's mental age 8, because a lot of our children, chronological age, their normal age can be 14, 15, but they're functioning at an 8-year-old level in those areas. So, and then what we realized is that we need to go past that, because a lot of children or adults and their families around the world are also in need of skills. So then we worked on and produced a new protocol called Skills Living. And Skills Living is actually turned out to be larger, more comprehensive than Skills Developing. And because we developed it later, the format, the platform is more user-friendly, and I like it a lot more, actually. And it's very, very, very broad. It sounds like AFLS is an assessment. Skills Living is not just an assessment, and it's not just functional living skills. It's, just go on there and take a look at it. It's huge. It's everything from, daily living skills to communication, social communication, vocational skills, leisure skills. I mean, there's tons and tons of stuff in there. And it is an assessment, but it links to lessons, just like skills does. So once you've assessed what your child or adult child needs, it links to how to teach that and what are the steps to teach that. So I love Skills Living. I've always said to Shannon that, I wish that I was younger and that I had more energy to put into developing more lessons and programs and activities for our teens and adults. Right now, I'm trying to work on slight modifications to the CARD program, Center for Autism, so that they actually do address more the needs of adolescents and adults. But yeah, I really recommend Skills Living. It's wonderful.
Wonderful. They want to know, are there any apps that can help autistic children to talk? We've got a good one to talk about, right? Camp Discovery.
Yeah, so Camp Discovery is it's not it doesn't promote expressive language. It will though teach a lot of the basics of language. So Camp Discovery is a when we started to build a lot of our lessons on skills, and then we're talking thousands and thousands of lessons, right? We realized that. Maybe there's a way that we can speed things up, because a lot of our kids, and maybe your kids, you will feel, they're sitting in the car and they're playing on a computer game, or at night there's no therapist with the child and the child is just playing on a computer game and playing on their iPad or something like that. So we decided to take the first 50 lessons and turn them into games. And that's what we did. And that is what Camp Discovery is. It's games that will teach your child exactly based on ABA. Like, it is the exact format of a discrete trial training protocol. And it will teach the basic first 50 lessons. So there's things like, basic labels and verbs, actions, colors and numbers and prepositions and pronouns and stuff. But after all, it is a computer program, so it's receptive. So it's sort of like, where touch the object that is underneath the whatever. So it teaches you in a receptive way. So it doesn't, the child is not vocalizing, but they are definitely identifying. So yeah, it's a great place to start. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are other apps or games out there for expressive use of language as well for autism. There's a lot of really good apps now, so it's worth looking into.
I gotta say that I love when you pair the lessons that are in skills. There used to be this app that was really popular, and then all of our phones decided it was so cool that they made it possible on every phone to do it. It's called Filters. And what it was before was just this app where it was this cartoon cat, and you pushed a button and you said something, and then the cat would say it back. And kids loved it, and they would do vocal production and make noises, and you could shape language because they loved looking at the cat saying what they said. Now they have all those filters, and you want to get a child making noises and shape it into language, put filters on your phone and have them see it. I don't know if you saw, it's viral today. We're doing court yesterday
I saw it
somewhere.
yesterday, yeah. It's
cat,
so funny.
Oh my gosh, the lawyer who got his filter stuck on the cat, it's hilarious. It's a whole big I'm not a cat meme today. But it's so reinforcing that the kids want to participate and want to make sounds to see their face in the thing, say the sound. And it all comes down to reinforcement, right? If it's fun enough, we want to try to work through. Love that. Okay, somebody wants to know, great resource in South Africa. My question is, do you have someone accessible here in South Africa that we can talk to work with a child with autism? And yes, you do.
Makes me very happy to introduce you to our wonderful, wonderful affiliate in South Africa. And that is the Star Academy. And they are in, there's in Joburg and in Pretoria, and I believe also in I want to say they have other locations.
In Durban?
Durban as well, yeah. And they are some of the best people I've ever met in my life, the founders of this organization, Ilana and Martin Gershowitz, and I highly recommend that you get in touch with them. In fact, if you go on the CARD website, Center for Autism and Related Disorders, there is a link to them. They are our most active affiliate, and they have an outstanding program. We trained a lot of their folks. They follow the CARD curriculum. They use skills. They use Institute for Behavior Training. They are I always say they are a very fantastic version of what we do here at CARD. and they have expanded as well. And they are not just in South Africa, but they are overseeing and supporting others in other African countries as well. I believe they are involved with Ghana and Zimbabwe and many other countries where they are providing support. Almost all of their behavior technicians are board certified autism technicians, BCATs. So they're very high quality. I really recommend them. Ilana, I don't have her book here, but I think last year she published a book that was also very good. Ilana is a mom of 2 children on the spectrum, and her first child, I would say probably she experienced some of the most severe symptoms of autism with him. And so she really has a deep understanding of all the medical aspects involved with children who are severely affected. She's fantastic. And then at the same time, her third child was a high functioning, and she was so observant that she noticed signs of autism in him when he was less than 2 years old. So we began intervention with him very early on, and he has recovered since. So she basically has both the entire spectrum she has experienced. And so she's an incredible resource, and I'm glad that I am able to refer you to her and to the Star Academy.
And she has a new podcast that's out. In fact, I was on her podcast next week, and Traven, we need to make that the link to that available to everybody. Her podcast is called Autism, What Now? And boy, we said some nice things about you behind your back, Dr. Graham-Pichet, because both of us are like your hugest fans. Like we would mud wrestle to be the person crowned your hugest fan. But I think we'd share it too. So we'll get that link on our Facebook page for you guys to listen to her podcast, because she's a dynamo, man. She's incredible. We've only got 30 seconds here, but somebody wants to know, so is skills living, can that be used for a 4-year-old as well? And we want to be really clear.
So skills developing, there are 2 skills. Skills developing is for the younger children, and skills living is for the older children. And the reason is that we've actually age normed those skills. So in other words, you don't really want to be teaching a 4-year-old things that are appropriate for an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
And so
you don't need to teach them how to balance their checkbook.
Exactly. So skills developing is the one that you want for a 4-year-old.
Okay, we are officially out of time, but Dr. Graham-Pichet, I want to thank you so much for being here. And I'm sorry that we didn't get to more of the questions. You guys keep them coming in. I do want to say that tomorrow on the show, we have Scott Badish, who is the former president of Autism Society of America. And he's going to be here with a new app that is out of Israel that had a lot of research around it, that it's an app that helps your child to learn emotions, to recognize facial expressions on other people, recognize their own emotions, regulate their emotions. It's called Emotiplay, and we're really excited to talk with them tomorrow. And on Friday, Vince Redmond is here, licensed marriage and family therapist, and he's going to be talking with us about levels of friendship and boundaries, and for our kiddos, how we teach them, but how we do that for ourselves. How we have boundaries and keep friends, but put them in different categories so that we don't get hurt and don't have expectations and that aren't realistic for certain levels of friends. So we're going to be talking about all of that on Friday during Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. So Dr. Graham-Pichet, again, thank you so much for being here. We're going to be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. Thanks for watching Autism Live. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.